Sound of Music. The Hills Are Alive with the Sound of Music. He's not listening.
Yeah.
Will you do the opening soliloquy from Shenandoah?
Not a chance.
Not a chance. Okay. Amy, is yours okay?
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, it's on.
Do we know? Anybody want to check with Susanna?
I can extra.
Do get stuck now.
Yes.
Terry, was the truck clear when you came up?
It was off the road, but it was still causing a problem coming up.
We'll go ahead and get going. We're 5 minutes past. So we call to order the Signal Mountain Town Council meeting June 24th. We'll begin with a pledge, and we'll follow that. Anyone here for invocation? We'll follow that with a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ready for roll call when you are, Carol.
Vice Mayor Amy Speed,
Here.
Councilmember Bill Lusk,
Here.
Councilmember Susanna Murdock is absent, Councilmember Robert Spalding,
Here.
and Mayor Dan.
Here. We'll begin with approval of the minutes. We found one typo on a page that's been noted. It was a ME instead of a MR, right?
Correct.
Here someone brought their harmonica, which is always nice. When someone's ready, we'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any discussion, any other changes to the minutes? We're approving minutes from May 3rd, May 7th, and May 13th, all at once. And these will go up on the, because it comes up from time to time. What's the policy for, these go up on the website like as soon as possible, right? Have we caught up on those,
As far as I know,
on what's on the website?
if that's not the case, I'm not aware of it.
Okay. All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not opposed, carries 4-0. This is time for a citizens' opportunity to address council, so we have like 2 opportunities tonight. One of them is going to be a public hearing when we're talking about the budget. So if you have specific budget things, you can wait, but there's nothing that says you can't speak twice, so you can come up. And before we start, Adele, would you mind standing up? This is Adele Pritchard. Did I pronounce it correctly this time? All right. Adele is 15 years old. She's interested in political science. Where do you go to school? Baylor. And she is studying what's happening in Signal Mountain as a use case and learning about zoning regulations and just all kinds of cool things already. So thanks for doing that, Adele. It's really cool. All right, if you'd like to come to the microphone
Can we,
and,
before we start, can I just make
Sure.
I need to clarify something. This has been weighing on me for the last little bit, and I just received some clarification. So it came to my attention right before the meeting that something that I said at one of the budget meetings, I think was taken out of context. So I really want to clarify, and I get nervous when I have to talk a lot, so my voice is probably going to shake. But I talked to a few firemen on my way in, and I don't remember my exact comment, but I think it had something to do with talking about being glad to work up here. I don't know my exact comment, but I read in the paper that when we were talking about the raise, several firemen had left, and I read the paper and I thought, that can't be true. And I realized it was true. So my intention in that comment, I am all for giving our employees a raise. I just want to clarify that. What I want to do is find another way to do it. And some of that looks like selling the water system or cutting other departments. I am not against that at all. And I do not in any way feel like any of our town employees, police or fire, should be grateful for their jobs in that context. Whatever my comment was, what I meant was there is a benefit of working on signal, meaning, and this is just what I make up, and I could have been totally wrong, but I think, every day you guys put your lives in jeopardy to keep our town safe. And there are certain areas that maybe would require more risk. I don't know, that's what I make up in my head, and that's all I meant by meaning it. Working on signal, maybe that's a perk of working on signal, like an added benefit. Not that anyone should be grateful they have a job or that they should be grateful that they work on signal, live on, like none of that. So if anything I said was offensive, I am apologizing from the bottom of my heart. Like I am fighting back tears thinking that I may have said something that has offended our police and fire. I ran on a platform supporting police and fire. I am an emergency room nurse. So I 100% stand behind our police and fire department. So again, I just wanted to apologize if anything that I said was offensive. And that's it. So I had
Thank
to
you.
get that off my chest because I'm about to cry.
I will vouch for Amy that she cares about everybody in this town to the same degree that we all do, and that she wouldn't purposefully say anything that was intended to cause harm like that. So, all right. So say your name and your address, and keep it to 3 minutes.
My name is Dick Graham. I'm 405 James Boulevard. And I just wanted, I don't have a gripe today. I have a compliment for some of our city employees. The guys in the water department really responded well to us over at the MAC. I volunteer over there doing a lot of that renovation work. And they found out that we needed the couple of the radiators removed out of the art room. Those are very heavy. Not a difficult job, but it requires manpower and capping off the pipes. They got over there within about an hour, a couple of hours, and it only took them about 2-3 hours to get them out of there, the pipes capped and everything completed. And that was really good to see the town departments working together, one department helping the other, and those guys deserve some applause for that, for really pitching in and helping out when we needed them quickly to get that done. And also like to invite all the council members, if you haven't been over to the MAC recently, you need to come by. There's been a lot of work done over there. The place is really looking good, and hopefully we'll get the go-ahead to occupy the whole building soon and get everything up and running. So that's it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, one grand, I would get Alex to like. And I'm shorter. Cheryl Graham, 405 James. I have an update on the Signa Mountain Elementary Preservation Fund. In 2018, we had 1,048 volunteer hours. And a lot of those volunteers are sitting behind me right now. So far in 2019, we have 613 volunteer hours that have been completed, so we're on track to do better than we did last year. We have currently renovated 8 rooms with 3 that are now under construction. Like you said, the art room, classroom number 1 in the old part of the building, which is going to be a conference/meeting room, which if you have any civic groups that you're a part of, that will be where you will be able to go. It's under construction. The boys' bathroom in the front of the building, that one's taken some time, but that's under construction too. And after those, the theater is next. We're going to get new ceiling tiles. The floor is already refinished, and if you have not seen it, you are missing out. That floor is absolutely gorgeous. We have to paint, trim, reinstall the old seats after some loving care, and install an HVAC system. So far, we have raised $31,000 toward the theater HVAC. So we have about another 20 to go to get the unit that we're thinking about. We were originally looking at mini splits, but it was going to take about 12 of them for that room, which was going to look horrendous, and they can be a maintenance issue when they're that high up off the floor, and we have to get up there and clean filters and all. So we're looking at just a basic system, so it's going to cost a bit more than the mini splits. We've had 4 concerts and a dance so far this year. The July performer for the Coffee House concert is to be announced. You can read more about these concerts and buy your tickets and donate anytime you want to donate at smefund.org. We do invite all of you to stop by and take a tour of the building. You're going to be amazed at how good it's looking. Raines Brothers, and I can't remember the name of the company who's doing the sprinkler system.
Johnson Controls.
Johnson Controls. They have all just, above and beyond helped us out. And the communication between all 3 has been great, and we're working very well together. They've only stepped through our ceiling twice, and the new sheetrock in the art room was not up yet, so it was okay. Let's see. The MAC Advisory Board is meeting tomorrow at 4:30 in the afternoon. That is a public meeting, and you're all welcome to come to that too. And volunteers and donations are always, as always, appreciated. And thank you all for your help, and come see us.
All right. Anyone else?
Is this the time to speak toward about the proposed tax?
No, we're going to have a budget hearing coming up in a bit.
Okay, so
Yeah,
that's
yeah, and that's more of we can talk more then too, yeah. State your name and address.
My name is Valerie Gibson, and I live at 405 South Street, Signal Mountain. And I am an eyewitness to what's going on at the MAC. Having been
You might have pushed the button down. There's a little red button.
No, it's red. Is that supposed to be red?
Should be red.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry. I've been at the MAC since it was a condominium for 17 raccoons, and they lived right over the art room. The roof leaked, and it wasn't water from the outside coming in. We had no heat. We did what we could. I met Karen Shropshire on her hands and knees, hand finishing and scraping the floors to try to make them look presentable so people would like to be there. And I would just like to thank everybody, the town council, who has brought this breath of fresh air to the MAC, and all the volunteers and all the people who are contributing. It's a new day at the MAC, and the spirit is viable, and the MAC is becoming the center that it always had the potential for being. And I would like to remind everybody that I'd like to talk to these people back here too, but I can't see you, that the Renaissance began with the arts, and watch the children coming in. We've got ballerinas this big, and we've got teenagers lugging tubas that are bigger than they are. In the afternoon is the best time to come because you can hear the children. One room has a violin going, the tuba's down the hall, there's drums over there, the ballerinas are dancing around. And in the art room, we've got young people learning to see in a way that they've never seen before, developing the right side of their brains and becoming becoming inspiring people in our community, and Signal Mountain is becoming the center of that, I think. I just want to thank everybody, and please keep it up, because I don't want to go back to the raccoons. Thank you.
Thanks, Val. Anyone else? Nope. All right, so we will close the citizens' comment portion. Next, we have a resolution. This is authorizing an MOA between the MAC Board and the Signal Mountain Elementary Preservation Fund Board. Boyd, you should probably take this one.
Sure. Historically, the MAC board, who gets monetary donations, has held those at the Community Foundation of Greater Chattanooga, and then used the funds for various projects at MAC. That organization charges 7% with a minimum of $500 a year for that service. And right now, it's my understanding that the board has about $2,700 in there. So a $500 fee was a pretty significant percentage of what they have. The Signal Mountain Elementary Preservation Fund, being a 501c3, has offered basically to provide the same service, to hold it for the MAC board. They will have control and authorization over it. Harry has drafted the MOA that would provide for that relationship, and by approving this, since the MAC board is an entity that's appointed by the town, it is a town board and serves at the pleasure of the council, I thought it was important that you guys approve this in advance of them signing it, and Harry agrees. So if you approve this, then the principals of those two organizations can sign it, and in the preservation fund will hold the funds at no charge, as opposed to the minimum of $500 a year to get Chattanooga Foundation to do it.
So we have Barb here from the MAC, and if anybody has any questions, also Angie is here with the Signal Mountain Elementary Preservation Fund. So if anybody has any questions, we can ask the principals.
So who's going to hold the funds?
The Signal Mountain Elementary Preservation Fund has a bank account up here.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's no charge.
And currently, we are using the other group to...
Using the Community Foundation, but we're about to lose $500 out of that because they charge that minimum per year, and their balance is only $2,700, so that's a pretty high fee.
Yeah.
And then any other things that come into that would be charged 7%, and there's none of that takes place with this arrangement.
And to clarify or expound on what I've said, both of those bodies, the MAC board and the Preservation Fund board, have reviewed the MOA and are in agreement with it. But again, we wanted to make sure council was comfortable with it before we moved forward.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I haven't done that yet. A resolution authorizing the Mountain Arts Community Center, MAC Board, to enter into a memorandum of agreement with the principal agents of the Signal Mountain Elementary Preservation Fund, SMEPF, establishing procedures for the SMEPF Board holding funds for and on the behalf of the MAC Board. Want to make your motion?
Motion.
So we have a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a second from Susanna. Any discussion? The money that the MAC, that has come in from, that the MAC board has been holding at the Community Foundation, where does decision-making power for how that is spent, how is that dealt with after this? Does anybody want to address that? You guys could both address it together if you'd like.
Angie Landrum. At the last MAC, 505 Georgia Avenue. At the last MAC board meeting, we agreed that we probably need to add an amendment to this that clarifies how the decision is made. SMEPF will hold the money, but it will be the MAC board that decides what they want to spend money on and votes. And once they approve, they just let us know, and then we release the money to them.
Did you ever send that suggested wording in? Did you send that suggested wording in? Has that been?
It's in the MAC board minutes, I think, that I sent you the draft of the minutes.
Can we amend this, Harry?
I'm
Number
not sure I
5.
understand. What this provides is that the funds will be held in a separate account, and the funds will not be dispersed except by written authorization from an officer of the board, the MAC board.
The MAC
So they have to request the funds.
Okay.
Are you wanting to add something about the decision has to be made? I think it's clear that the decision for the disbursement of these funds has to be made by the MAC board.
Okay, we weren't clear on that. So
Yeah.
it seemed like this addressed the first step, which is moving the money from Community Foundation to SMEPF, but it didn't seem to clarify in the future when funds come in, we deposit them in our account, but the decision as to how they're spent. Do you feel like this clarifies that?
Well, I mean, it provides that the funds have to stay into that account until written authorization from the board is
Okay.
provided to SMEPF.
Okay, well, that's what we want.
It does not say how the MAC board makes a decision as to what's to be dispersed, but I don't think that's the intent of this agreement.
Okay.
Barb, you comfortable with that?
anything else?
Is it- Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other discussion? We have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed, carries 5-0. All right. So we're going to begin our, we moved to the public hearing part. We're going to begin this. One of the things that hasn't happened, and I'll take the blame for this because I've had it queued up to ask a couple of times and it hasn't. In responding to emails and talking to folks who have questions, I'm not going to say anybody has called or written and said, wow, I'm so excited that my taxes are going to go up or potentially go up. No one feels that way. But the concerns, one of the concerns has been the amount of the staff raises and the adjustment for the new water company person coming in. And Boyd hasn't had a chance to talk about that and talk about where the numbers came from and that whole thing. So this time, before we start the open discussion, I'd like for Boyd to fill us in.
Sam, could you give me a hand, please? I probably don't have enough of these. I made plenty when Dan said we might want to cover this. I'll pass a few of those around. And if you will, pass those down for me, please. This is in terms of the 5% raises. First, a little history. Back in 15-16, I think Bill's the only person that was here then. We dealt with this situation where we had fallen considerably behind and had to make major adjustments. And we dealt with other issues in the pay structure as well. But it was beyond what we're doing now in terms of the percentages that were required to get things aligned. As a result of that, when the decision was made by the council at the time to make those adjustments, we had a pretty pointed discussion about the need to look at these things on an ongoing basis and try to prevent getting that far behind, and also try to prevent the revolving door that we had for a few years with staff. The focus has been fire and police, but we had the same issue with other positions. came to light specifically when we tried to fill a mechanic's position, and we couldn't hire anybody. We had people that were interested, but with what we were paying, no one would take the job. So,
What year was that?
15, 16.
Okay.
So this is the information that we worked on in looking at where we stand with, from various sources. The Burris Thompson Associates salary survey, we pulled information from the MTAS salary survey, and then we direct contacted other municipalities as well and looked at how we stacked up. Sam did a lot of work on this, put it together in this format, and then went back and looked at, and the red or pink highlights are the salaries that are the lowest. And as you'll see, in many cases, we held that position. So we looked at, as a whole, you'll see that we didn't look at every single position, but we tried to take a good cross-section from our command staff or administrators. We looked at library, police officers, firefighters, administrative assistants, heavy equipment operators, mechanics, light equipment operators, and got as much information as we could. It's difficult to some degree because the reporting can vary from study to study and from place to place. You might get a range, or some people will give you the actuals that are being paid at that time. Some places pay everybody in a position the exact same thing. Other places, if you've been there longer, you're going to make a little more. So it's hard to get absolute apples to apples, but we did as best we could to get that laid out to just see where we ended up. When it was all said and done, we were kind of in the same position we were before, in that in a lot of cases we were well over 5% behind. But I simply didn't feel anything beyond that was reasonable, and the goal was to simply try to stay somewhat competitive. So that decision was mine, that I felt if we made that adjustment that we would remain somewhat competitive. If you look, and you can just pick, obviously if I go through here and just pick a few, people will consider that I'm pointing out the ones that I want you to see, and that's not the intent. So if you look at this and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. There are some, probably our closest comparative model is Collegedale as far as size and population. They obviously have a lot larger commercial footprint than we do, but they're pretty close to our size in population, and they're ahead of us in pretty much all areas now. And last check I had, they're still looking at a 6% raise, so they'll still pull ahead some.
Isn't Lookout Mountain fairly similar, a little more similar to us in that they don't have as much commercial? And
they do,
similar,
but they're a lot smaller in population.
they're smaller.
Yeah, and they have a combined fire and police, public safety, as opposed to separate departments. So again, it's another scenario where it's hard to get apples to apples, and that's why we try to look at multiple positions from all the area municipalities to the extent possible, and then also went to the other salary surveys.
Where's the breakdown for the water?
Water is not on here because that's not a general fund supported operation. These are positions that are in the general fund.
Do we have, or I'm just trying to recall for the director of that, what it compares to on this?
When we set that, we used the Burris Thompson, I'm probably not pronouncing that correct, study, which was done in 2016. And that's where we came up with the recommendation. Well, actually, when we originally did the discussion and I did the presentation, when council asked what I thought would need to be done, my estimate was $75,000. And then when we looked at that study from 2016, we took two different numbers. One is the chief officer of a utility, and the other was for water distribution manager. And either of those two could fit our position. But again, to get a fairly realistic and reasonable number as possible, I took the average of those two, and that's where we came up with the 79,000 number. And when we had the MTAS salary survey done, or rate study done, council chose that $79,000 as what we would provide them. In that presentation it was May 1st of 2018 when we first discussed that. That is where I first expressed my position that given our other department heads that are in that upper level, and the fact that we were going to be increasing the requirements for the water director's position, and all made sense that we would bring that position up to the level of those other department heads. But based on the number that was decided upon, the 79,000, it would project that well above our police chief, fire chief, finance director, public works director, folks that have been here for many years and done an excellent job. And the idea of whether it's an existing personnel or bringing somebody in, that we would bring them in that much above those positions, I felt would be detrimental.
What is the current salary for that position, for the water?
Currently, person,
while he's looking that up too, these are two separate things that we probably need to talk about, but you know, this is a hearing. We can sort of structure this how we want to. We want to get to the public hearing, you know, relatively quickly. So if we want to choose one or the other, we can have as much discussion tonight as we want to. I don't want to get too far away from where he was talking about the 5%. If anybody has questions about that up here as well, that he can clarify off of what he's going off of. He just hasn't had an opportunity to do this yet at any of our meetings. And I think we've probably all done this privately, you know, with him, looked at the numbers, but we haven't had a chance to do it publicly like we should. Are you finding that?
and I do not have that water director's current.
It should be in the budget.
Yep. I don't think it's going to be broken out that way. I don't think we have it broken out that way in the budget, a current for just one position.
I thought we did.
Yes. I'm sorry, I had pulled the general fund stuff together, but I did not pull that. Yeah, I didn't think it was broken out that way. I'll see if I can get that when I have a moment. It's around, it's in the 60s.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
See if this, go look at this. Can you pull it off of that if you want to see it exactly? Is it on that list? It's not a scroll.
It's not a,
Two fingers slide up. Two fingers together and slide up, yeah.
this?
Yeah. Is that with
I
two fingers?
don't deal with,
Here.
On the same hand.
I'm a PC guy. Not a- Carolyn, the sheet you did on
Is it stormwater manager? What's the title?
water director,
On these,
here's 2992.
Is that hourly?
Yeah.
So times 40?
Yeah, does that help? That's,
Thank you.
here.
these are current salaries for
In the pink.
2018, 19?
In the pink, for hours, they are, our comparison was our market. That is what, that's not starting, it's what someone who's been here for a few years has required training and everything would be making. So that's,
So that's not what they're making right now. This is just like a,
that's how, right, that's
Right.
how we compare.
so this doesn't include the 5% that we're
No.
Yeah,
proposing.
I think you should take a moment and, all of the other terms show, towns' names. Ours has the word market by it. So maybe talk about how you come to that and what that means to you.
On our scale and what we established back in 15, 16, you have a minimum. And if you have someone you hire in that doesn't have any experience, if it's a position that requires certification, they don't have that, so that's where they would start. We recently hired a police officer in that scenario. For a certified police position like police, they come in at minimum. When they graduate the academy, they move to what's called P1 or position 1. So then that anniversary becomes their certification date when they got out of the academy. A year later, they would move to P2. A year after that, they would move to market. So if we hire a police officer, they have to get through the academy and then have 2 years of experience with us before they get to market. And market meaning that you have a good and well-trained person who is marketable, and we need to be paying them enough that we can retain them. Positions that don't require certifications, if they have 3 years of experience, they could start at P1. And then they would move to P2 and P3. So the market is, even if we hired someone who has over 3 years experience as a police officer or a firefighter, and they have the required certifications, the highest they can come in is P2. And then it would take them another year to get to market. So when we look at our market, we're trying to be reasonable in saying that this isn't what we're hiring people at. We're paying this amount. That's going to be market. When you look at the lower part of this chart, when it just talks about police and fire, that's kind of lined out where you have entry level. Then the second year, third year, fourth year, that's where they would move up the scale then. So when we talk about market, that's someone who's been here for a while and has training and is marketable to other agencies as much as anything. So that's what we looked at, and again, we don't have a lot of control over how other places report these things, but we tried to, if there was a range, we would take the midpoint of that. If everybody made the same in a particular position, we tried to note that. So this is what we were able to put together and reviewed in looking at how we aligned with other area agencies. And say in most instances, we were the lowest around. And we're looking at just, again, trying to be more competitive to make sure that we didn't get into a situation where we were starting to lose people. The last time we did this, again, was 15, 16, and overall the percentages for the various departments were much higher than this adjustment's going to be.
Do you remember about what that was?
Yes, I can tell you. In 15-16, and this is just the actual pay raises for the departments. Administration was 5%, building and codes totaled 17%, facilities maintenance was 10%, finance was 14%, fire was 9.71%, judicial was 9%, library was 6%, MAC was 5%, Parks and Rec was 11%, police was 11.3%, and public works was 12.22%. So, Eve, and I know you say they're two separate things, but in looking at that, even with the other adjustments for the top level department heads, the only department that's higher than that, and most are considerably lower, the only department that's higher than that is admin, and we have an additional position there, so that skewed that. So that's part of the process of trying to make sure we don't get in a position where we take that big of a hit again in making these market adjustments and staying competitive.
So we can, there's a lot more, to talk about this, so we can do it. But do you want to continue this discussion now or open the public hearing portion? What's
I'd like to hear
council's?
the public hearing.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm interested to hear. I would like to hear from the public.
So we will open our public hearing now. Come to the mic. You still need to say who you are and where you live. And this is different from the 3-minute thing. We can have a conversation. It's Robert's Rules tries to keep things, to 5 minutes if possible. We don't have to stick by that, but be conscious of other people behind you that might want to talk as well. So not speaking to you specifically.
I know.
But.
And I'll be fast. I hate public speaking. So Elizabeth Baker, 1 Carriage Hill. Because this council has not justified, questioned, or even had a public conversation about the 6 positions getting the 10 to 24% raises, it puts a citizen like me in an awkward position to stand up here in front of those employees and ask you what exactly is going on. The 10 to 24% raises for those 6 positions represents far more than $36,000 or just a penny of a tax increase. It represents changing the compensation rate structure for the town. I would have thought as a resident, as a citizen, that in changing the compensation structure for the town, I would have heard things about best practices, organizational changes, or maybe even how job descriptions might shift or change for those positions in question. Yet, the song has been a song of crickets. So I only have one question that I would like each of the council members to answer. Maybe Mrs. Speak will go this way. What is the implication of changing the town's rate structure in a budget vote? I mean, you answered my question this morning, so I really appreciate that. I know your answer.
Can you, what is the implication?
What is the implication of changing the town's rate structure in a budget vote?
I think it's a significant seismic shift. And I'm concerned about that too, because clearly you're sort of setting the stage for future raises to cost more and more money. And I think an active personnel committee is a hugely important part of the checks and balances in this process for merit-based increases. But cost of living increases are to be expected, and so that's my question has kind of been about that too. This, like I've worked in the same place for 8 years and I've never gotten a raise, and my husband's worked for the same employer for a long time and he hasn't, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't, because I think that people should be compensated fairly and I think we have to be competitive. But but the implication of doing this does,
It merits more conversation, I believe.
I think it warrants probably more discussion, and I think people need to have a chance to kind of formulate what their feelings are about it as well, and
Any
make
other
their
council
feelings known.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with Susanna. So, I mean, there's not much more. I think there needs to be a lot. I've been saying for weeks we need to have more conversations about this. This is a really, really big deal.
Thank you.
So what happens when your question was about setting the pay structure during a budget? It didn't get set. It was set as it came to us within the manager's recommended budget, excuse me. Which, if procedure is followed, which it appears it has been, comes from a personnel committee meeting where the manager says, this is what we think. And if I understand the process properly, you got advice from MTAS on where the rates should be set, was part of the process of going all the way back to the water.
Their salary structure.
Were the 10 to 24
Well, I'm getting to that.
percent raises discussed within the personnel committee?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. I would like to provide you with my research on this that shows exactly, I mean, I know what you're saying, but the rate structure is.
Yeah, I didn't finish saying what I was saying.
I know, but in true fashion conversation, although it's in public now, I'll cut you off and leave you there, which I do a lot with Dan. But I'd like you to leave you with my research on the implications. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Bruce Bry, 1002 Arden Way. I must say I agree totally with Councilman Spaulding that we need to look at what we're doing on the water system. That was because we get that one with their current rates, what we had in there going to get, would have paid for everything you got on the budget with no tax increase. And I think that's the thing we do because later on in that discussion, last week, or 2 weeks ago, you turned white as can be. And just lost some surge when he brought that up. Because he said, oh, we already discussed that. Well, this is one that can look at this because you later on said we need to look at ways we can factor things out. And this is one you can do that. And I hope it isn't dry, the ink dry. I hope we can go ahead and change that because you have to have the thing is, the other report you've got on the rate structure, that said basically you gotta have a rate structure for your water system, 15% for each of 3 years.
Correct.
In order to get that thing in line. You're going to do a 22% increase in taxes and then do another 48% for raise the water system? No. I hope you're not going to do that because the water system right now is a point where it's got a real problem.
On what do you base that?
I base it on, well, I got some things here that say from AWWA that says that the biggest thing you got to do is the rehabilitation of the distribution system. That's the one thing. One
Right.
thing in Minneapolis, not Minneapolis, San Francisco, their position up there, they've got 4,000 miles. And they're saying it could run them up to 3.8 million per mile. Now, there are differences in what we've got here, but what it is. But you still got a lot of things to do, and it's going to be very expensive. Going to be very expensive. And I don't think you're going to without going to giving it to the public utilities down in Chattanooga, that's going to be the only way you're going to get around it. Because otherwise you're going to be bankrupt.
The amount and schedule of repairs based on Signal Mountain keeping its water system versus Tennessee American Water Company buying the water system versus WRUD purchasing the water system, the repairs actually take place faster with the town doing it because there isn't as much that needs to go to other companies, and we still own the system when we're done.
No, you're getting it cheaper now. You're not good cheap. You're getting it cheaper with going to the public work system rather than putting it in your going to.
How do you? That's a strong assertion, and I'm not sure how you support that because all of the information that we heard from the multiple meetings that we had from the study done by engineers who do this for a living.
Well, I do that stuff for a living too.
Okay. I mean, and thank you for bringing your expertise to us because that helps. We appreciate that. But did you see anything in the Arcadis study that would be different if another company owned it versus if we do it? It's the same things that need to be repaired, and our timeline on repair, because we can be more aggressive. And Boyd, correct me if I'm wrong. We fix things faster than they do, and we still own our water system. There's that there's that saying, which is kind of cute, that it's good to walk a mile in another man's shoes, but the problem with that is you're a mile away from them, and then you have their shoes. And in this, we get to keep our shoes. We get to keep this thing that
We get to
provides
keep the
water to us.
structure. We don't own the source.
Nor does Tennessee American.
Right.
Well,
But I think he's bringing up a good point.
They actually purify the water, and once they purify it, that's their water, okay? They draw it out just like you can go down and get a pail and draw your water out. But if you want to put chlorine in it and you want to treat it, then it's their water, and they're selling it to us, and we have to sell it and resell it at a higher price just to meet our obligations. And also, like he said, he's not the only one that says that bankruptcy in something like this is something to consider, because every one of our projects, the new fire hall, the paving, all of those have doubled in cost. And even though you might estimate them at one cost, when they came down to the bids, you don't have any control over that. And when I would shudder to think what it would cost if we were still operating our sewer system, where the reason they got rid of that is because they couldn't afford to continue to do those repairs. And I think that the repairs are going to cost a lot more than what's been projected. I think it was suggested it's irresponsible to sell it. I suggested it's irresponsible to not have these discussions to discuss these kind of issues. Because if you're facing potential bankruptcy on trying to make these, when we got into all those repairs with the sewer.
Who is facing potential bankruptcy?
Well, I'm saying that if you start making all these estimates on what it's going to cost, and it's going to cost and double, there's more than one person looking at this that is going to be much higher than the 600,000 that we're going to be looking at and spending each year. That's a concern to me. Now, I don't have any other facts than you do when we go out and project a project that ends up doubling in cost, and we say, it's doubling cost.
And
so
both of our bidders were using the same engineering. Same engineering we are. We're all using the same numbers.
And what I'm saying is no matter what engineers you use, no matter what projections you use, you can end up spending twice or even more on some of these. And every time we tear up the road to make a water repair, then we've got to factor that in too, and we're already behind on our paving.
And that would still be the same thing if the water company was sold.
Again, they can fix it cheaper, they can sell their product cheaper, and they can operate it cheaper, and that's just a fact.
And he's also talking about, we're getting lost in that also prevents the tax increase. That's what this whole, I'm assuming a lot of people are here for. We're looking at, I think from the last meeting that I wasn't able to be at, 21.5% tax increase. So it's worth talking about again, because when we originally voted on the water system, we weren't looking at a 22 or 21.5% tax increase. So all I hear you saying is we should be talking about it. And honestly, I feel like you're not even open to talking about it.
That's exactly what we're doing, is talking about it. These are words. And I mean, there are points that are just facts. I don't want my taxes to go up. I voted to keep the water system because I think it's the responsible thing to do, and I did that based on lots of study. I attended every meetings. I'm the only person here who did, just so you know. I talked with all the principals from the water companies more than once. I got outside consulting, and I did research into towns that wish they hadn't sold their water company. And that happens often, and it costs them so much to get it back. And
Or they can't at all.
Or they what?
Or they can't at all.
Or they can't at all. And also, if things go bad, and let's say the $600,000, which, by the way, we are spending more per year than either company was going to. So that's a difference. We will fix things more aggressively. But let's say something goes wrong with us or goes wrong with them. If the cost goes up, anybody's going to do what they have to do in order to fix it. I mean,
That's where you're going to get
up.
bankrupt.
5 years down the road, when you don't own your water company anymore and somebody else owns it, you lose control. This isn't about just this year. This is about next year and the year after that. So, and I don't know, Harry, I don't know what to do. We voted on this.
Well, the council can't revote the water, sale of the water issue tonight. There would have to be a motion to rescind that decision, and it would have to be placed on an agenda for a meeting down the road. So there can't be a revote tonight on the water system.
But if somebody wanted to make a motion to rescind, they could make it. Any council member could make that now, couldn't they?
They could make that motion tonight. But I think it can be discussed because it does relate to the effect on tax proposal.
Very much.
But it can't be, the decision cannot be changed
No,
tonight.
it can't be changed right now. It has to be having another meeting.
Correct.
For this to be governed.
Okay.
But it has to be considered, because in place of the 22%, you're going to get rid of that, and you're going to end up, then you're going to have to start worrying about your 15% each year for 3 years. Because you got to worry about that also. And I don't think you can have it, everything in one way. It's got to be this way.
Well, thank you. And reasonable people, and I appreciate your speaking, and I don't know what to do about me turning white if something frightens me.
You're as white as a pea when he brought that up.
I know, but I'm pretty white to start with.
And you know, it was really white. And you also were tongue-tied right then.
Well, sure, I'm tongue-tied now because we've discussed this, we've gone through this, we've had lots of people speak. There's probably not been an issue that's been discussed as much as this one was. And at some point you make a decision. And doing this, and I will remind everybody tonight, we're all volunteers, no one gets paid a dime for this, there's no benefit in this. We have to sometimes make decisions that are unpopular, but they're the right thing to do. And we have to take a stand. Yeah, and people can disagree on that, so.
But, because they didn't, 2 or 3 years ago, up until last year, they were waiting for you to get on board. Because you had everything you wanted. We got to do this study, we got to do that study, got to do that study. Rather than trying to find out.
So you think I was involved in something planned to get me on board so that we would have this outcome?
It's obvious, if you could see what it is, everything you were doing on it, but then you came out the other way. But the thing you got to do is you got to look at where you're going to stand on total. And the total is going to be selling the water system. Now, most of the people here, or a lot of the people here, don't want to do that. But you find out they're not on the water system to begin with. They're already on the Walden Ridge. So they're not.
And that complicates it further still, because we have some folks on the council who are on one system and one on another as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Well, thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Paul Hendricks, 31 Mountain Orchard Path. And at the risk of a spoiler alert, I rise to support the basic budget. anytime you're looking at a budget, there's obviously be things in it that you like, things in it you don't like, good, bad. We'd all like to have more services, less taxes at the same time, but that only works in Washington. So y'all have to balance the budget, obviously. But there are a lot of things in the budget to talk about, but I wanted to focus on one in particular. When I was on the council, one of my great joys was working, and one of the great joys of being on the council was meeting, getting to know, and work with the town staff, the town employees. I was constantly impressed with the quality of people we had working for us, from the directors of the departments all the way down to, just the day-to-day workers, water workers, our police, our fire, everybody else. I served on the council with Herschel Dick. Herschel had been an employee of the town for like 40 years, mostly with the water department. He knew more about, he knew every inch of pipe in this town, and everybody, he could probably tell you what the pressure of your shower was on a house-by-house basis. That kind of knowledge and experience is not the kind of thing you can impart in a orientation session. My point there being that retaining employees is always better, always cheaper than having to constantly rehire and constantly look for new ones. And I can tell you this, not only from my 4 years on the council, but from my 35 years in medicine, working with nurses, working with people in hospitals, knowing what you lose in efficiency and in institutional knowledge when you have a lot of turnover, when you start running people off either through bad working conditions, which I don't think is ever the case up here, and I think that's kind of what Amy was getting at, was the positive working conditions, but also through income. I mean, ultimately, people have to eat, they have to pay their bills, and prices go up, you know. We'd all like to see the price of paving stay low. We'd all like to see the price of water stay low, but things just go up. So what I am encouraging you to do is I'm supporting the pay increase for the town. I don't know if Boyd's increase stayed in or out. It kept going in and out. I don't know where it's at now, but I would obviously support that too, because Boyd and I work together, and I've had...
He's out.
What?
He's out.
He's out, well,
yeah.
I would put it back in, but that's your decision. I'll support either way, and I can understand. But the point is, from Boyd, everybody, I was always very impressed with our staff. The important point is retaining employees, retaining skilled employees, not only their knowledge of their job, but their knowledge of the town. I mean, you can know a lot about public works, but you got to know Signal Mountain's public works. You got to know what the roads look like, how badly Albert Road needs to be repaved, you know, for instance. So just to make a long story short, I urge y'all to pass this budget. I urge you to support the pay increase for our town's employees. I urge you to retain our employees, to support workers, to support them well with good incomes. So I think that's about that.
Thank you.
I agree, Paul, that you're 100% correct on retention, and paying for it is where we're coming to that decision on how to do it. So I couldn't agree with you more that we're very fortunate that Boyd has hired a fire chief and a police chief that, together with the council, I think we've got one of the best departments in Hamilton County. And so I would like to do everything we can to support those employees. So I agree with you there.
Great. I'm glad to hear that.
I would like to say too, Paul, first of all, thank you for your service and for being here tonight. I think, I don't want to speak for the council, but it seems to me that we all are on board with wanting to have a pay increase or support our employees. It's the how. My issue with the budget approving it as is not the pay increase, it's that we've not made any cuts. So we've just went to a tax increase. And so I think there are other ways to do it. One of them we've talked about was the water system. We can't do that today, I know. But what I would like to see is, if the 5% pay increase is the most important thing to the citizens in this council, then yes, let's support that, but let's find another way to fund that. versus a 22% tax increase.
And I honestly have not gone through the budget line by line. So
I have, and my statement wasn't able to be read for legal reasons, but I just would like to see us make more of an effort on how we can pinch it to make those things happen. I don't have an issue. I'm 100% in agreement with you, and that's part of why I spoke in the beginning that I think some of the things I said was misconstrued. So I just think we got to find another way to do it. Or at least not do that high of a tax increase. Maybe we do half.
Again, it's hard for me to address all that. I'm just here to speak for the employees and support them and to support the increased support for them.
Sure. All right, thanks, Paul.
All right, good.
To say that our budget hasn't been cut is, I don't think that's exactly the case, because we actually have a smaller budget than we had last year, and it includes the raises. And so in order to get there, there had to be significant trimming across the department. Boyd, do you want to talk about that at all, about the budget that you brought to us, which was smaller than last year's budget? I mean, how did it work out that way with also having these pay increases?
Well, I mean, it would be difficult to go into specifics, but that was it. We looked at how we could lower the budget, operational budget, so that we had the ability to accommodate these adjustments. You know, that when we started, and perhaps I didn't state it as strongly enough, but that was my focus in this budget. I lived through the revolving door in the police department. When I took this position, when we started this year, all of our police officers and one of our sergeants started between December of 15 and November of 16. Until recently, we hadn't lost anybody after we fixed the issue there. And it wasn't just pay. It was how related to pay, but how do we get people to market quickly? We can say our market is here, but if it takes you 10 years to get there, it's not really a fair scenario. So we addressed a lot of different things, and we were able to fix it. If you want to know what it's like to worry about the phone ringing at night, when all of your police officers are brand new and green, and they're out there doing the job that they're paid to do, and they're doing it well, but they don't have the experience. That's disconcerting. I did that as a chief. I did it as a town manager. We don't have that issue, and I don't want to go back there. And that was the discussion we had back in 15-16. We're going to have to make adjustments. We're just staying somewhat competitive. If we had gone much further then, maybe not so much, then we can kind of. The fact of the matter is we're going to have to do more than just cost of living increases occasionally to keep that competitive scenario. And when I say just cost of living increases, I feel bad saying that because it sounds like it's not appreciated, and nothing's further from the truth. I'm just saying there are times when we're going to have to do more if we're going to stay competitive. I see that's where we are. Again, for over a year, I've been saying on multiple occasions how I felt about the other adjustments and our other department heads in that upper level. The quality of staff we have there, the job they do, it just absolutely my position that they have to be aligned properly. So that was my focus in this budget. That's why I brought it down as much as I could to try to get this taken care of within the budget and keep it below what it had been in the past. Very frankly, that's why I didn't have a raise in there. That's what's important to me. So that's what I set out to do, was get the budget to a point where we could do these things for staff and for the community, because I think the negative impact of losing people, it's extremely important at the operational level, but it's even more when you have the quality of department heads that we do and we take a chance on losing them. Again, that's just my position, but that's why the budget was the way it was, and that's why it was brought down, so that we could try to work those things into the budget. So I don't know, again, specifics, I can tell you exactly where we cut a little here and cut a little there, but we just looked at the operational budget and tried to pull it down to the point where we could do these things, because I felt that was what was important this year.
But our budget was 700,000 at a deficit, and so if we just kept the 5% raise, that's, I think, I'm doing this from memory, it was like, was it 200,000? Like, that's an 8-cent tax increase, not a 22% or 36 cents. Do you know what I'm saying? So, like, where the other stuff, if you were it's on.
Just keep going off. And I think we've kind of gotten lost in some of the debate, for lack of a better term, about what has been covered and what hasn't in the past. Have we made up to the call? Have we not? If we stipulate, for the sake of this discussion that we have, let's say the last tax increase took care of all of that, and we're squared there. Then we haven't covered $580,000 in additional personnel costs. And we haven't covered 170-ish on the debt service for the fire station. So that gets us to right at the 700,000. So that was another focus, was to try to get to that number of things that we've known that we have to cover and have, whether it's part of it's hall, part of it's this. None of that really matters. We've got this swing of about $1.5 million. And through tax increases and additional revenue, we've covered about half of that. So we still have about half to go. So that's what I wanted to make sure, that what we needed to cover was only those things that we still haven't addressed by other means. So you're right, there's $700,000 short, but that was all established, known issues that have yet to be addressed. So that, in a nutshell, that was my approach to the budget. We knew we had this much, we still needed to cover, at least get it down to that, get it down low enough that these raises could go in and still be at that mark, because I thought that was what was important, again, because of, I know where I've been and what impact it has on the town. And the directive 4 years ago was, let's make sure we don't get there again.
And it just keeps coming back to me, and it seems like I'm just going to speak up until the system reboots. Sam, if you want to maybe take yours offline, and we'll see if it comes back up. We're down for some reason. But we'll all just speak up for a few minutes. That the problem that we're facing is not an expense problem. It's a revenue problem. And in that, the final loss of the hall tax. Yeah, I see where you're getting at that.
It's both.
It's both, but we have a new fire hall that we have to take care of, and we have the firefighters there that have to be taken care of. So we have $150,000 in debt service, $580,000 in salaries, right? Mm-hmm. And we're behind on paving, and so that's where the extra money came in to try to catch us up as we move forward. We also don't want to be in this place 2 years from now. If we hadn't lost the hall tax, we would have exactly what we needed this year. What's that?
The hall tax is $150,000 of this budget.
We
had a tax increase 2 years ago that was 32 cents to help compensate for the hall tax.
Mm-hmm. But it didn't compensate for it completely.
Well, 150,000 is different than 1.5 million or 700,000. So that is a very small amount. That's like a 3 cents So if it's the hall tax, then let's just raise taxes 3 cents.
But in the meantime,
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's hard when we keep bringing that up and we keep rehashing it.
But it is a portion.
We have raised taxes 2 years ago to compensate for the hall tax. This is a huge tax increase we're talking about.
Not enough, and in the meantime, we've added $580,000 in expense for firefighters. And we have $150,000 in debt service for the fire hall. I mean, those are two things that exist, and our cost of pavement has doubled, our cost of paving, and we didn't even do any last year, and so we're behind on that. I mean, so.
I thought it was determined it was $389,000 in debt service.
I think you're right.
That's total debt
Total
service.
debt service.
It's 150 for the fire hall.
Right, but
Well,
the total
it's-
debt service
it's
is
more than that, isn't it?
389.
Yep. Principal and
I don't
interest
have my
and
book, I have
everything.
it all right now.
I mean,
So it's,
exactly.
you know, this is just where we are. Let's continue unless, you guys okay? Sure.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Philip Lehman, 2499 Bugle Callway.
What's your last
and
name, Philip?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Philip Lehman, 2499 Bugle Callway. I came to Bugle Callway, Fox Run. I'm concerned about the tax increase, and that's why I came to speak to you all today. January is one of my least favorite months out of the year, and it's not because Christmas is done, and it's not because it's cold and the weather's terrible. It's usually because in January, I find out that I've run out of money. I've spent too much money, and it happens because I had fun in December, and maybe I bought my wife a nice present, or we did some fun expenditures, but then that credit card bill comes in January, and we have to make some hard decisions. Inevitably, something happens in January where we get a phone call and it's, hey, the Collins want to go out to dinner. You guys want to go? And either me or my wife needs to make this hard discussion that says, that sounds like a really good idea, but we shouldn't, right? We just don't have the money. And it seems to me that Signal Mountain is facing January a little bit right now. We have a lot of expenses, but we just don't have the money. The reason that matters is because this has real impacts on what happens in Signal Mountain going forward. And the problem with Signal Mountain is actually both a strength and a negative. And the problem is that we have tremendous advantages from being up here on the mountain. And the disadvantage is that so does everybody else who lives on this mountain but doesn't reside within Signal Mountain. I'm talking about the people who live in unincorporated Hamilton County. I'm talking about the people who live over in Walden. And that they get to enjoy many of the same services that we do at tremendously less expense. And that makes their place to live significantly more attractive to anybody looking to move to this area than those who are residing within Signal Mountain. And so I think, honestly, if we're going to pass this budget, might I also suggest that we just throw in another $20,000 and we could put in a big sign that says, Signal Mountain, just like Walden, just a little bit more expensive. Because that's exactly what we're talking about. When we raise taxes, what we make is ourselves less competitive to Walden. Paradoxically, I think what that will do is have a negative impact on our overall tax receipts, because when a place is more expensive, people don't want to live here. And you're saying that's totally crazy. That's not the way it works. That's actually exactly how it works. If you look at some extremely expensive places to, I don't know, Greenwich, Connecticut, and by no means am I comparing Signal Mountain to Greenwich, Connecticut, but if you look at Greenwich, Connecticut, you're going to actually see that townhouse prices are declining. And the reasons for that are numerous, but a large part of it has to do with the fact that the new federal tax law prohibits you to deduct, as you probably are fully well aware, any more than $10,000 worth of taxes on top of your federal income tax. There's an actual ceiling. And so people who used to be getting this big advantage, and they said, well, my taxes are high, but at least I can write them off, now currently can't do that. And I realize that that's probably a minority of people here up in Signal Mountain, but I really think it's a real problem. I think that we are marching towards this point where we are making ourselves much, much less competitive. And so I agree with you, Mayor, that we have both a revenue and an expense problem, and I think we need to look at both. I think one thing that we really need to consider, in my opinion, is why we're providing services and we're not getting paid for them. And I think that's the current case, for example, for all the excellent services that are done by our police and our fire in Walden or unincorporated Hamilton. We've talked about this at prior meetings, that we aren't being compensated for that, those services. Is that a fair statement? Okay.
I think it's overstated.
Okay, but I believe it's around 11% of the call volume is what I heard at an earlier word meeting. Is that approximately
Do you want to
correct?
speak to Mike's numbers?
Oh, Mike's
I
here.
don't have those with me. I don't want to.
Mike was here.
Is the chief here?
He was.
Well, suffice to say, it's a reasonable amount of money. Now, I'm a physician, and I work down at Memorial Hospital. I'm a cardiologist, actually. And occasionally what will happen is that you'll hear that there's a heart attack that comes in at Park Ridge Hospital. And Park Ridge, as you probably know, is just a half a mile away from Memorial Hospital. But as a cardiologist who's employed at Memorial, I don't run over and help out with that, by definition, emergency, because I don't have privileges there. I don't get paid to work at Park Ridge.
We do have privileges, though.
We do, but we're not being compensated for them.
Go ahead.
Do you disagree?
Well, there's a twofold part to that, because they do come in and assist us.
Of course.
On some things, and so.
But it's a substantial amount of work.
I like the premise of your suggestions. It's just that it might not be as directly correlated to that 11% that you're talking about.
I don't think it's going to be a perfect 11%. By no means do I think Walden, for example, would completely offset the budget deficit. But I do think that we could talk about it as a reasonable option to increase our revenues, because, as has been completely pointed out by a lot of people, we're a little limited in the way in which we can raise revenue here. And I think it's a really important thing. And by all means, I think that if we were to have a negotiation with Walden or whatever other group, by full means, put every dime towards you guys. I mean, you're doing the work. You should get paid for the work that you're doing. But right now, I kind of look at it as you're working for free. And that's wonderful, but then comes the hard reality that we're in a budget deficit. I could talk longer. I don't want to take anybody else's time, but suffice it to say that, again, I really do think that we're in January here in Signal Mountain. And I think each one of you would respond appropriately in your own finances and in your own budget, that when you're faced with spending too much, you got to find a way to cut back. So if you're thinking that you would do the exact same thing in your own personal household budget, as representatives, what I'm asking you to do is to do the same thing to represent me at Signal Mountain, to find those cuts, to work towards them. I promise you they're there. I just don't think we've gone through them.
What if the cuts, even though you and I may not agree on this,
Sure.
What if the cuts aren't there?
Right.
Would you cut services?
Would I cut
because
services?
That's what a municipal government is faced with.
Absolutely.
It's a little different from a town.
I don't think you're going to be able to have it both ways, but right now I'd like to see, right now, my opinion is that it doesn't seem like it's a compromise. It just seems like it's a raise, and that every single request is currently, barring some paving, had been granted. I think we were originally talking, you at the last meeting said, well, maybe we should come down on our paving. But we haven't gone through the budget. I mean, I believe there's a line item in the budget.
But that had more to do with not having it be a penny more than it needed to be in order to make sure that our budget was going to be good in 21,
Sure.
22. And so it's less about, 2021. It's less about the amount of paving than
Right.
it is about looking at the numbers and where we are right now. But you're dismissing everything that Boyd said earlier about all the process that came prior to getting here. That first day, all-day budget meeting is normally where you take your time and you hammer down through everything. The department heads are there. You ask them, can you have less of this?
Right.
Can you cut this? Can you do all of that? That's part of that process. So this isn't the beginning. A lot of that's been done, and you
Well,
can't
But we
discount
didn't
that.
cut.
But
in that
I don't know
meeting.
how
That
much,
meeting was cut
I wasn't
short.
there. It was in the middle of the workday, and I probably was working. But I believe as the budget current stands, there's a $25,000 request to repave and reline the town hall parking lot. Is that correct?
I don't remember the
I'm
exact
gonna-
number, but that's in there.
Ish. I mean, did you guys all park okay tonight? There's a $140,000 excavator. I mean, at the
No.
end of the day.
No, sir, there's not.
That's not in there.
Okay. But the point is
No,
is
but
that
you
we could
keep
have.
saying it is, and it's not.
All right.
I mean, you've said it, yeah,
I'll
on
renege.
paper.
I'll renege on
Okay.
that. Let the record show. But the point is that I think in public, I think we would all appreciate that honest and candid discussion. And I think, like any other budget, I believe some of that work has been done, and I think what we're asking you to do is to do a little bit more.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr., is it Lehman?
Landon.
Okay, got it. You can. I was just going to speak to, you were talking about the services in Walden, and Walden did have a contract with the county, and it was around $100,000, and that contract was not renewed, I think, a year ago. Is that right?
A little bit more than that, yeah.
Okay. Just for your, so they were paying at least 100,000, which would be equivalent to like a 3 to 4 cent change in our taxes if we were to have that type of contract with us instead of the county. So just for your understanding.
All right, thank you.
My name is Tom Francescan, 905 Crown Point Road West. My wife was raised on Signal Mountain. She's virtually lived here just about all her life as a family. We've been up here 40 years, so a lot of history, a lot of experience on Signal Mountain. I'm in the wealth management business. We do financial planning and investment management, and I say that to say this. I appreciated the other, he might have left, gentleman's comments on certain things, but we work with people, clients on a fairly regular basis, talking about budgets, helping them work through a spending plan or a budget, whichever term you like to use on that. And we get the question, if it doesn't come up directly, but basically implied, how do I build wealth? How do I accumulate wealth? Well, that's a pretty simple thing. We all know and understand that, but we kind of start where you spend less than you earn, you avoid debt, you set money aside and invest it over an extended period of time, and generally, if you've got good management, you're going to come out okay. Well, I'm one of those who thinks that businesses or governments, in my opinion, should operate the same way. And for me, because in my career, I'm an old guy, so I've had a lot of experiences and have done a lot of things in my life, so I've been through what I'm about to illustrate more than one occasion, but I'm just going to pick a number because I suspect most in this crowd can relate to this, that if I'm making $75,000 a year and I lose my job for whatever reason, and I end up taking another job making $50,000 a year, I'm not going to be able to go, I think most of us are not going to be able to go to our neighbors and say, you know what, I think you need to give me some more money because now I'm not making as much as I was. So somehow or another, we figure out how to live on what our income is. So I didn't come here tonight, I didn't realize that it was going to be, kind of a debate, or not a debate, but an open discussion, because to me, I think you hear the input, you take it back, wrestle around with what you hear, and make the decision. Now, I'm hopeful that when you hear what's going on tonight, and I suspect there's some in this crowd that will be for the tax increase, but you will take that back and reconsider this proposed tax increase, because we've just come off of this water rate, which has been mentioned, and now there's a proposed 22 or right at 22% tax increase. So I don't care what you call it. Virtually everybody in this room, I suspect, will be paying a substantial amount of money more than they're paying today. I'm not in favor of that. And I hope you will reconsider that. Go ahead.
Well, there are expenses associated with running a town. And for instance, one of the things that is on the plate, one of the bigger expenses that we budgeted for last year, is something I know is near and dear to your heart, and that's the renewal of Marion and Driver Fields. You've stood here with other people before, right, raising money. And you guys raised, do you remember how much from your group?
I'm sorry.
Do you remember how much you guys raised? It seems like you guys had $10,000 or $20,000 that you were contributing.
For raise where?
That you were raising to go towards Marion and Driver, the ball fields repair.
Oh, you mean when we did that just among the teams a few years ago?
Yeah.
$10,000 or $12,000, something like that.
But the town is going, what's our total going to come out on that project?
Total project's $880,000, and it's a 50-50.
So we're going to spend another $440,000 because we own it and because it's an asset and it needs to be done, and you benefit from it, and lots of people benefit from it. There are things that we do now that are generational, that people are going to benefit for years, and some of those things got a little behind in Signal Mountain, and so what's happening is an effort to catch those up. Also, annexations took place. They're extant. There's nothing we can do about that. They have to have a fire hall. The fire hall has to have people. That has to be paid for. And so those are added things that came in, and it's just where we are. And I don't mean this in a snarky way at all, because I really don't know an answer. I wish everyone who's vehement against the tax increase could recognize that no one up here wants a tax increase. And you could sit down at the meetings as a financial planner and say, here's what we'll cut then. When you look at Signal Mountain, this is it's not very big, but this is all our expenses, that pie. It's pretty easy to look at that one, and that one, and recognize that you're up to 75% of our expenses are made up in fire, police, public works, parks and recreation. That's 3/4 of our budget is right there. They've all been asked to cut this year. They've all been asked to trim. They started from that standpoint. So it's not that you're looking at a bunch of people up there going, yay, we can spend other people's money. We're faced with a dilemma that's an unpleasant dilemma. And sometimes doing the right thing is unpopular.
Other people want to comment. I appreciate that, Dan. I understand it, and when I made the comment a few minutes ago about using the analogy of creating wealth, that is very simple. Everybody in this room understands that. I'm not saying it's easy. And yes, I appreciate what the town has done. I'm not speaking against any line item in particular because, frankly, I don't have all the information you guys have. Now, I'd be glad to meet with any committee that wants to and help work through and look at some things. I'd be glad to do that, and I would offer that. But, and again, as far as the employees of Signal Mountain, and as Amy said a few minutes ago, if that is the most important issue, then by all means, we've got some of the best employees. I think our fire and police department is probably the best in the state. So I'm all for that. I'm not speaking against that. I'm just simply saying, and by the way, I'm very familiar with the hall tax too in our business, and I understand the impact that has when that goes away. That's all I'm suggesting is that when you have X income or revenue streams, you got to somehow figure out how to operate. In my mind, you have to operate within those means. That's the way most of us have to live. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's, to speak to Mr. Franciscan on the revenue stream, another issue about the way a small town works like this is that pie where you see, I'm not good at these percentages, looks like about 65% of that is one source, and that's local taxes. So that's where the majority of the income comes from in a town that doesn't have a large retail base. And when we lost, what percentage was the hall tax when we had it? It was about $750,000. We had about a $7 million budget, so it's about a seventh.
So we're around 10, and it fluctuated.
Yeah.
Sometimes it would be around 5, other times it was over 900,000.
Right.
So it's hard to peg on an ongoing basis.
All right, who's next? And thank you.
Denman Road, 907 Cherokee. I was bound and determined not to say anything about it, but subjects kept coming up, and I said, "Boy, I'd like to say something else." So I'll ask Bo. We have expenses, talk about just this year, that are into our budget, that are going to disappear as things get paid for. Is that not true?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, the ball field will get paid for.
Well, but that's not part of the operating budget.
Oh, it's not? Okay.
Those things are budgeted in capital projects.
Okay, all right, I understand that. Is there anything in that budget that will disappear as far as costs are concerned next year?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, there's always those things. If we need to buy 5 radios for the fire department this year, we may not need to buy those 5
or cars
next year.
Cars
are
comes out of a separate
primarily come out of the vehicle replacement fund.
All right, so we got different funds.
We plan ahead for those, and but you know, as far as major projects, that what we have in the works has been segregated over so that That doesn't skew things, and there really aren't any major projects in this budget. That's one of the things that we did. We didn't get anything going that's not already in terms of
So it'll be
just
pretty
basic
much-
capital projects. It's very basic.
Okay, so we'll be facing sort of the same thing next year, but kind of, sort of.
Depends on what you mean by that.
Well,
If, as
you
it stands
eliminate
right
any-
now, we will have to work very hard to maintain as lean a budget as possible. Now, some of the things, Dan's proposal was to add, I'm sorry, I should say the mayor, the paving in for this year, and then that money could be used the following year to make up some of the other deficits and so forth. Something else that's been brought up that I agree with completely is that we need to look at non-resident fees and
Okay,
other
I
types of user fees and stuff like
understand
that.
that.
We need to, it's difficult to do if you want to look at doing something comparable, when we see what we end up having to do with taxes, if anything, then we have a guide on, well, if we raise taxes 22%, we certainly need to raise non-resident fees at least that much, and maybe more. And as we do those things, that then lends itself to helping us next year to make sure that we're not back in a situation like this. So there's a lot of things that play into it, but
Okay.
we have to continue to keep a lean budget. We have to look at these other revenue sources to make sure that we have some additional revenue. Those are going to help, but I mean, that's not a great deal of money, but if we can hit the right spot, then developing those other revenue sources will help us.
Okay, different
avoid-
factors will influence
Right.
different ways.
Right.
Okay, and now Harry sort of cleared this up for me, kinda, but Harry said we could, we took a vote on the water system, voted to keep it. We could rescind that. Would that mean we'd have to go back through all the public meetings, all the propositions again? Well, that would be kind of unfair, because you had public input, and they need to know what the public still thinks. That's just a thought. But legally, they just can rescind it. But now, what if time goes on a little, somebody else doesn't like that? Well, let's rescind that last one. When does a vote to pass something stick?
Well, there's always the opportunity to rescind a previous vote. If the majority of the council wants to change a vote, they can do so.
At any time?
Yes.
Yeah.
What if they decide not to rescind it?
Then there will be no change.
But they can decide later on to rescind it. This seems to be watery to me. I mean, I'm having a little trouble with that. We voted to keep the system, which I'm for. If we lose control, as Dan says, we're going to lose control of the rates and probably the cost. Now, I haven't delved into the cost, but we're definitely going to lose control of the rate structure. So that was one reason that I said, hey, let's keep it. Let's don't lose it. Okay, guys, thanks.
Thank you, Don. And I want to point out that, and to anybody who's speaking, we can all speak, and just people tend to stare at me.
I'll say something. We were talking about like specific cuts, and part of what, and these are minor, but I do feel like each thing is helpful, because every 1 cent we go down is $29,000. So, and just some of the things, and I'm not picking on any particular one, like I gotta look, because I had written this out. I haven't looked at this all week. So we have Parks and Rec is looking at $16,000 for zero-turn mowers. Do we have to get those?
Boy, do you want to talk about that?
It depends on how you define have to.
Well, could we cut that?
The ones we have are constantly in the shop. One of the things that we've done in the past is basically by non-commercial grade mowers that are less expensive, trying to save money, and they don't last very long, and they stay in the shop. We absolutely need some, and spending a little bit more on actual commercial grade mowers is what we're looking to do this time in anticipation of ultimately, hopefully saving some money because we're not paying for repairs all the time. But
How much would you say we're paying on repairs? Like, I mean, is this some,
can't
what
tell
I
you
mean
that
is,
off
could
the
we
top of
wait
my
a
head, no.
year? Or do we have,
Well,
would it need to be done in this budget?
and I wish if Jared was here, we might be able to get his a medical issue with family, so he couldn't be here, so. And,
I get that.
It's not only a matter of cost. I mean, I would say that we could easily, we spend thousands a year on repairs with these mowers as they are now.
Okay.
Because they're old, they're in bad shape, and they get hard use. We've got a lot of grass.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm just
at
coming
this
up with
point- I
ideas,
understand,
so-
and I'm not, I have no opposition to that. I
Okay.
think in the very first meeting, I made the point that we can have these type of discussions. And I'm just simply explaining the rationale with how little there is in the budget of items like that, the fact that they're in there, the fact that there's some of the radios for the fire department that we have to start replacing because they're gonna stop servicing them. There are some
Yeah,
things
that's
that
gotta be
that
done,
really
sure.
needed to be in there, and those were some because of the predicament we were in.
Do you mind if, before we start line item, we let the public finish?
No, you just said we could talk, so I was talking.
No, okay.
So,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and you-
yeah, I mean, and I don't want to like debate them all because they are small cuts, but what I'm hearing our citizens say is that that's what they want us to do, and we haven't done it. And we're about to vote,
It-
right,
it has-
tonight?
It has been.
We, as a council, have not proposed cuts, and I'm proposing some. So
Sure.
I would, when do we talk about some of the things that we can?
We'll come back.
Okay.
We'll come back. Anyone else want to speak?
Paul Toth, 42 Ridge Rock.
What's your last name, Paul?
Toth.
T-O-T-A?
Yes. The last meeting you guys had, you were talking about sanitation increases of 30%, and there was no discussion as to what was encompassing that increase in the fees. And from where I stand, I just would rather probably have fees charged, assessed to me, as opposed to having my property taxes tied into something that can't be controlled by the town. I didn't see any increases in fuel costs. I don't know what made up those 30% increases.
Are you talking about the contract increase from
With
Santec?
sanitation, yeah.
The sanitation
With
fee.
Santec.
Yeah,
Are you talking about the sanitation fee?
sanitation, yes.
It's just another way to it's, from my understanding, it has nothing to do with
But since
sanitation.
it
or not a lot.
increased year over year 30%, I just saw that that's something that could be problematic coming towards our property tax versus a fee that we could like call them up, why are you raising my fees, 30% this year over last year? Because companies usually have a good reason for that. It's not, the way it is.
We have a multi-year contract with our provider for hauling and for landfill services.
Okay.
In the middle of that contract, they informed us that they wanted an increase, but they missed a deadline for giving us that notice. So what that allowed us to do was go out, we actually put out an RFP and bid that out again.
Okay.
And our current provider came in as the low bid, but still we're looking at that significant increase. And actually, it's a little higher than we anticipated even. But we did take the time to do the RFP, put it out. We got bids from multiple vendors.
And that covers the recycling center and then garbage pickup inside
The
the town?
recycling center is separate.
Oh, okay.
The hauling is for, we pick up the trash and take it to the transfer station and it's compacted. But they come up and haul it off of the mountain, and then we have to pay for the landfill fees and all of that. So we do the household pickup. We also have the bins at the transfer station for building materials and metal and all of that, and they haul that off. So it's from the mountain to its final destination, whether that be.
Those
you know,
are
in
where the
landfill.
fees.
Right. We have to.
And is
pay for all
that something that they know that they're set for the next 5-year period, or are those fees ongoing?
I believe we're set for a 2-year period.
Okay.
And it's,
Off the top
and
of
when we
my head.
RFP, I mean, those are the contracts that come in.
Right. And just looking through the budget, I saw that the MAC brings in about 0.4% of the budget of its cost, and it's right now operating at 2% an expense. The revenue is 0.4, the expense is 2. Is that due to the all of the construction that's going on there?
I think you're looking at the operational budget when you talk about the 2% of the budget is what the
Right.
MAC is.
Okay.
The
I'm just wondering, I'm fairly new to the mountain, so I'm just wondering if, because of the construction.
No.
So it is something that costs probably 1.5%.
Yeah,
over.
it's 2% of the entire budget. The MAC
Okay.
is 2% of the entire budget, and the amount of money that the MAC brings in from a percentage standpoint is pretty close to, I believe, what Parks and Recreation brings in. I believe when I calculated them both, they both
Right.
bring in about the same percentage-wise. And they're both over budget this year, by the way, just a
Okay.
little bit. Well, I shouldn't say over budget. We have a budget adjustment for both of those, which puts them, and I thought, and I looked, when I was looking through the budget numbers today, I thought it was interesting. They both came in about 1%, cost them about 1% more. We're
Right.
doing a budget adjustment for those departments. So
Okay.
they seem to be running about the same way.
And
You know,
then.
32,000 is what they
But-
generate.
Yeah.
To answer your question, I think the revenue generating capabilities of MAC have been hindered for the last couple of years due to the renovations and all that. I mean, a significant portion of the building is closed. The auditorium's not usable, so to that question, I think that has an impact, and we're hoping once we get
Okay.
back up and open fully, those numbers will come up.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
as you heard-
Yeah, both my
Specifically-
kids go there all the
Yeah,
time, so,
to specifically answer your question, so last year, am I looking at the right? That's this year, right? It was $32,583 in generating revenue, and we are estimating that it'll be this much in 2000? 34,893 the next year.
Okay.
And I think operating costs are.
Would be around
100
90 or something like that.
Yeah, so.
Okay. Okay.
No, I know you had asked for
Yeah.
specifics and.
Yeah. And just so I understand, the new firehouse is built out by Ace Hardware. That was.
That's not ours.
That's not, that's,
That's not, yeah.
okay, that's not.
That's
So
the
we-
county's.
So is it the one that's on Shackelford Ridge?
Yes.
Okay. And that was due to annexations?
Correct.
Okay, and in how many houses did that?
I don't know.
Are we under development for that?
I don't recall the number that's there now. It services an area larger than what is annexed.
It was required.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if, you know, Signal Mountain is pretty small and it's pretty well developed already. There's not a lot of like land for a lot of projects. There was Danbury Cove. It's about 17 homes.
It's
that
estimated that there's going to be up to 700 new homes on the Shackelford Ridge area if it's fully developed in
Okay.
those areas. So there is a potential for development.
There are some larger tracts out there, so that it will
and
potentially develop.
And the firehouse had to be built at that particular point in time because of the already developed.
Because of the annexation.
When we annexed, the town committed to providing a level of service that was consistent with what we provided the town as a whole. And we specifically committed to have a study conducted to determine if we needed to build a fire station to accomplish that.
Okay.
We actually did that twice, and they both came out that that's what you need to do to ensure that you're able to meet that requirement.
Right, okay.
And again, it's not just, technically that's what led to it, but that's not the only benefit from it. That station services other areas, including the high school, Nolan, areas that were long before in the town. So our capabilities have improved beyond just servicing the annexed area.
Okay, so the one by Ace Hardware, that is like a county station? Okay, so
It's-
that would
it's
service.
being built by the county, and it houses a volunteer Walden Ridge Emergency Service.
And if you look at that and think, that doesn't make any sense, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I was like,
it
yeah,
seems
I was,
like we
I was
ought to be
trying
doing
to
this differently.
figure that out.
Yeah,
So
it doesn't make any sense at all to me, but I understand how
Yeah.
it ended up that way. But man, I hope we can plan better in the future, looking
Well,
at the entire
and-
mountain.
Yeah, and we
I know you
broach
tried.
that,
Yeah.
broach that
Yeah.
subject, but.
for unincorporated areas and Walden, that is a call fee that they receive? If
don't
there's
know.
an
I don't
actual call, or is there an actual revenue from?
There's no revenue derived by the volunteer fire department, say like in some of these paid fire departments where you are on a subscription basis. They're not a subscription-based fire
I see.
department.
Okay. Okay. That's pretty much all I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Melissa Cantrell, 105 South Drive. I just want to thank you all for doing this. It's excruciating, really, to listen to, and I'm sure to do it too. I've, as some of you know, been through a lot of these budget meetings over the past 4 years, 5 years. I always find it interesting to see that we're not equally complimentary or critical of councils. You know, when we talk about raising taxes, we did that before. And, you know, like I said, I think for equity's sake, that I'd like to see the same faces in the audience every year. I do have a few issues with this budget. I'm not going into it. You know, I'm not one of you. I do have a little bit of a problem, as a couple of other people have said, is using the budget as a mechanism for structural change in the rates. It just doesn't seem quite the way to do it. And that's really all I have to say, other than, I am not sure that I've been becoming alarmed about the budget over the past few years. I'm going, are we expecting money from somewhere else? And then we keep talking about the water system. I'm not sure, well, I know for a fact, I don't want something that I've paid rates for used to prevent a tax increase, and then later on, 5 years down the road or so, I'm paying more and more in rates, and there's nothing I can do about it. I don't have anyone local to talk to. And that's what's going to happen. I mean, if you sit there and you go through and read about these towns who have privatized, they eventually hit that wall. And, you know, we can agree to disagree, but I don't want that used as a solution.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alicia Toth, Paul's partner. And I just had a question, just as a follow-up. 42 Ridge Rock Drive. Thank you. As for ideas as to what to look at for line items, I think Amy started talking to this. I wanted to ask a question about miscellaneous line items that are, it looks like in every fund, and it looks like it's actually the largest line item within, say, a group or a fund. So I wanted to ask the question, what does that make up? And is there opportunity there to see, because if you start adding up all those line items, it's over, hundreds of thousands of dollars if you take the whole thing into consideration. So again, I'm just trying to think of ideas to help you guys out, because I commend everyone that's come up here to speak, and I know it's been hard and painful, but I do think that we do expect that our government is run like our household would be, which is we cut back when we need to, we look at everything to try to find $1 anywhere, and so that would be my question on the miscellaneous items. So I don't know if anybody can speak to that.
That would be a town manager function.
Well, I'm not, when you say they're significant in every
Well, just they're listed in every single section, and it's miscellaneous, so you don't really know what it's for. And then when you look at the actual dollar size of it compared to the other line items that are spelled out, it's sometimes much higher. So it seems like it's just a a placeholder, if you will, to put things. And again, I do finance for a living, so I've seen it before. But typically, if it's big enough, right, to put in there, you usually want to call it out as a specific line item so you know what it's for, so you don't lose sight of what you're spending your money on. So I get it that you probably have to budget for things that you don't plan for, or things come up. We understand that, but to have that line item be higher than other critical ones or basic ones, that's where I just thought that was a place that could be looked at a little bit more closely.
I'm not really sure. I'll look at that, but the ones that are in the departments are relatively small. Cumulatively, they may add up to.
Yeah, and I
Can you
wish
give us a
I didn't
specific
print it all out because it was
example?
204 pages, but I looked at it and, again,
Yeah.
it was just,
What's an example of one?
yeah, I was trying to see if I even had one here listed to specify, but
So,
I don't have the I don't think I
Well, they're
have the
divided
detailed
into
ones printed
departments
off.
by finance, fire, judicial, MAC, operating
Mhm.
transfers, parks and recreation, police, public works, debt service, building and codes, administration. Any of those ring a bell?
Well, they all do, because again, like I said, there's a miscellaneous line item, I think, in every single fund with single department. And again, it might not be across the board, but if you look at the line items within those expenses and say one is, you know exactly what it is and it says $5,000, the miscellaneous bucket is like $20,000. So if the $5,000 is the most expensive that you're spending in the entire list that you're actually calling out, that's where I'm just trying to understand, why would we have, say, another $20,000 just sitting in a miscellaneous space? If it's truly that large and we truly need it, you would think it would kind of fall into the ones that are called out. That's
Yeah, so
all.
Here's an example that I think would probably be one of the larger ones, because it's administration. Yeah. So administration's miscellaneous, actual in 2017 was $6,920.74. 2017-18 was $6,798. Budgeted for 2018-19 was $9,200, and it hasn't been re-estimated as of yet. So that's where we are. So
Yeah, and so why did it go up, do we know?
That's the fund, if you're talking about for this current year?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when we had a good bit of discussion with council and budgets about certain things that they wanted to see. And that's really the only place that we can have any ability to deal with things like that. So that's what I was thinking. I think Carol verified. The 9,200 is.
And what
I
were the
think by
things that we were
far-
talking about? I don't remember.
Anything that happens during the course of the year that comes up that council would want to act on.
like if we bought honor trees.
Exactly.
Travel.
Things that we.
For courses and stuff.
That's for the
Okay.
course of the year, anything that would come up. We have a total of $9,200 for the whole thing. And
My budget in finance, I spent $200, $100. I budgeted 12. We took it down to 5. We re-estimated it again at 12. But that would cover, that's the unanticipated. There's things that don't fit into the other line items that come up in, and that does happen from time to time. And unanticipated expenses for like computer stuff, additional supplies that we didn't expect. But on the overall, the $1,200 is a very small line item in my budget.
Yeah.
and
So
that's about what the others run.
Well, I'm
up
grabbing
to
one
us.
that I would think would be large, like parks, because I could just see all kinds of things happening in parks where you
Mhm.
needed to hire somebody to get rid of bees, perhaps behind home plate or something. In 2016-17, the miscellaneous was $642. 2017-18, it was $192.86. Budgeted 2018-19 was $100, and it doesn't look like that's been spent yet. So, and that's a big department. That's a pretty small, for something that's 10% of our budget, to have $100, budgeted to miscellaneous.
And when you look at actuals, you have to consider too that we will go back and either us or during the audit even And if something's originally charged as miscellaneous, and then when we get to the end of the year and there's funds available in a line item that is well suited for that, it can be moved to that, so.
Do you want to do one more, because it's come up several times? So the
And
MAC,
again, I understand incidentals, because again,
Right.
life
No, I'm-
happens, but it's more where that line item is higher than any of the others that you have called out. That's where I kind of wonder,
And
does it
again,
need
if
to be
you'll-
that
if
high?
you'll tell me where that is, I would love to
And
look
I
at
would
it.
love to, but I didn't print off that exact
think
page. But
the-
there was
the
one
90
example where I saw it was like $19,000. Like I said, it was about 20 grand. And then if I looked at the actual section and what was the highest, amount that we were spending in whatever category it was like $7,000. So it kind of just didn't make sense
And
that we were
again,
just
I'll be
kind
happy to
of,
look at it,
yeah.
but I
Yeah, and I'm just saying it's an opportunity
That 9,200
potentially.
is the highest one, so
Yeah.
I'm just not understanding what you're looking at.
Okay.
If you want
I mean,
send-
I can go back and I can send a very specific email
That
to,
would be great.
call some out if you really want me to.
great.
I'd be happy to, because again, I do numbers all day long and I see outliers like that and it just makes me, I just ask the question.
was it potentially in
please
the water
under-
department?
It could have been. I don't remember
Potentially in
exactly.
the water department? And
If
because
it's in the
that's
water
not-
department, that's,
I will look.
That's not this budget. It's a completely separate budget from this. Doesn't affect this.
Meaning from the general fund.
Right.
You're
The water
talking about.
department has its own fund, and I could see that one having
in
some
in
bizarre
that,
miscellaneous.
especially in that type of operation, having some miscellaneous funds available, because,
Will you look on
you
your
know,
budget?
with-
Will you
we
look on your
have to
budget?
have funds appropriated before we can
It'd be
spend
good to
them.
have an answer.
Yeah.
So if something major happens and we don't have funds available for that, then something like water department where you're having to deliver a service and
Mhm.
get that water through, that's more problematic than some other operation where we have some latitude. So,
Yeah.
in that fund, there's likely.
Water's 4,000.
Pardon?
It's 4,000. I totally interrupted you, I'm sorry. I was just
That's right.
focused.
No, it's fine.
I'm sorry.
No, so
It's like-
there are,
Yep.
that's part of the explanation, and please understand that that's what this is. It's not an argument.
Yeah, no,
I really want to understand and then
I
try
appreciate
to-
you guys even having this open
try to
forum. I think it's
explain.
great.
The miscellaneous
I think
items
that-
that I'm aware of, that I'm thinking of, are minimal, and it's simply
Mm-hmm.
because we have to have a little bit of latitude.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we move through the budget towards the end of the year, if we can reassign that to a line item that's actually more appropriate, we will. So it may look like we don't end up using that, but at the time, we needed that flexibility to be able to do something that
Yeah.
required attention.
No, and I've just come from the school of that. You try to put, like, if you have to estimate for things and you know it's going to be in a certain category, you just try to put that in that category so that it doesn't look
Absolutely.
like that you're trying to put this, because believe me, I've gotten questioned on many times in my world that, what are you putting in miscellaneous that you can't tell me what it's for? So.
Oh, was it State Street Aid? Does that ring a bell?
It
50,000?
could. Again, the number just stuck out. It was like 19.
50,000. that-
Is miscellaneous?
Yeah.
But it's State Street Aid. Explain what State Street Aid is.
It really is kind of what it implies. That is the fund that pays for paving, street maintenance, and stuff like that. So it, again, similar to water.
Mhm.
And the thing about water, you can also have some latitude.
If you could speak to the adjusted too, that would probably be helpful to explain it to her.
In budgeting, because it's fee driven as opposed to tax revenue driven. So in state street aid, it's mostly financed via general fund. It's a different fund, but there's a transfer from general fund into that pays for most of that operation. And it's similar in that if you have a major issue with a roadway, you have to have the ability to address that and function. So that, and again, when you were talking about fund, didn't really click, because I was going.
Yeah, I was just
more
going by how you guys
I was
structure your
looking
budget.
departmentally, you were talking fund, so.
Yeah.
Um,
Like another fund that I was just trying to understand what it was for is the drug fund.
mhm.
That's where we get our drugs.
Well, that's why I'm like, who has those? Because I wasn't aware that we needed those in government, but no, I just was trying to understand what it was.
Those are funds that come from fines and forfeitures from drug cases and court cases. And they're restricted in how they can be used for the police department, and then even at that, for only certain types of expenditures.
Okay.
So that's not tax supported. That's from fines, forfeitures, and
So it's
stuff
revenue.
from the court.
Revenue only.
Right. Well, no, we spend funds out of that. That fund is where we often buy, replace body armor, radar guns.
Mhm.
There are certain things that you can buy from that fund, and if the revenue for that fund is generated through the courts, that's money we don't have to use tax dollars for.
Okay. Cool. Thank you for explaining.
Thank you. Interesting questions, too.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, my final comments would just be, again, and I sent an email to all of you last night. My husband and I wrote together, and thank you for responding, Suzanne. I appreciate that. But yeah, I think we're just, again, we're new here too, and we're just wanting to, one, understand what makes this up, and two, our plan is to stay here for a very long time. So, any way we can help, if it helps to have more ideas for the council, I think Paul and I would both be available.
Thank you.
'Cause like I said, we do this for a living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go. Yeah, this isn't. Yeah.
It's a public forum, right? What do we call it? Public hearing. Public hearing.
Down the road, 907 Cherokee. Now, Harry, this is probably for you too. Do we have funds aside from what is considered in the operating budget? The water fund, I understand we can't tap that, but if, let's say for instance, the capital fund, if you can cover all projects and have to maintain a certain balance, I think you have to do that. But there's more money than that. Is there any way this council can enact an enactment to tap some of that funds to cover the shortage in the operating budget?
Well, you have asked a question that I probably cannot answer. I would think not, but I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, are you talking specifically about the capital projects fund?
Well, that would be an example. Any side fund.
We can pull from the general fund, but it's not a good idea to pay for operating expenses through that.
I didn't say it was a good
We
idea.
could buy a year.
Yeah, I'd say it was a good idea.
Right.
But in an emergency.
Yeah, we could buy time.
You can't.
That way.
Okay. Can you consider that, all of you?
I wouldn't consider it.
You would, well.
Not on this particular case.
Okay, well, you guys discuss that, but that's not I came up with that you could cover the loss.
One of the other things that you have to consider is a fund balance policy that says that we will try not to dip below 35% of our budget.
I covered that.
Right. So if you're pulling money from fund balance, if your budget goes up $100,000 and you pull that from fund balance, it drops $100,000. That's a $200,000 shift. So that has a significant impact on that percentage.
Well, my premise was
any you pull out of there, it has a significant impact.
Yeah, my premise was if you were going to have an obvious overage, that's my premise. Then
Keep in mind also, we intend to continue to exist beyond this year. And so, so part of this whole budget process is looking down the road as well. So,
I know that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? We have two.
Ann Haygood, 506 James Boulevard. I'd like to really thank council and staff for your hard work on this budget. It is a tough year. And I appreciate also all the citizens, getting involved and trying to help come up with solutions. We knew in advance it would be tight, and you all have been diligent in seeking solutions. I thank you for that. I agree wholeheartedly that we need to balance our spending and our revenue year after year after year, just as we do in our families. And that plays into why I think selling the water system is not the solution for us. It is not fiscally responsible because we're not solving our problem by doing that. It is important to note, as an aside, that the water system budget, again, is by law separate from the town budget. Expenses for the water system are not funded by the town budget, but are paid by water department revenue. Selling the water system would not fix the fact that we're spending more than we bring in. When money from the sale is gone, we'd be right back in a hole, and it would be even harder to dig our way out then than it is now. And we would no longer own one of our most valuable assets. And we would have no control over rates or improvements. It would amount to a loan that does not solve the problem on the backs of our water system ratepayers, with the ratepayers paying more from now until eternity. In the last couple of years, we did quite a lot of research on our water system and the idea of selling it. In interviews with others who had sold their systems, as well as with some who had not sold, one theme was repeated to us many times. If there's a problem in your budget that is not directly related to the water system, then selling your water system will not solve your problem. Others told us, if you're selling your system because you need money for your municipal budget, it's like a loan, and it is the most expensive loan you have ever seen. Such a sale would indeed gain cash for our general fund, but it would do so by selling out the ratepayers who would be paying for this far into the future and would have no vote or no control over their rates or their improvements. Those of us who are planning to stay here, who have made it abundantly clear that we want to keep our water system. Wisely, our current council has voted to retain our water system. Again, I thank you for not seeking a quick fix, but a responsible solution to our operating budget issues. And again, I also thank council staff and all of our citizens for working so hard in finding solutions. This is one of the beautiful things about the town of Signal Mountain.
Thank you.
Now, I countered to most of those things that she had mentioned. First of all, we don't own the water. Next of all, the larger, bigger entity has deeper pockets than we do. So if we get into serious repair situations, we've already put sugar coats over this rate increase. If it had been 45% right off the bat, I don't think anyone would have gone for it. But by spreading it out over 15% each time for each year, that's a little bit of a sugar, but it's still a tax increase.
Are you saying that was done with that purpose?
I'm saying that it ultimately is the end goal to get to that particular rate. And so you spread it out over a longer time period, but it still represents about a 45%
But
increase.
that suggestion came to us from a water study done by an outside body and said that this is how to do it.
And that's fine. I'm saying
But that's not
whether
trying to
it's
hide
done,
anything.
Well, it's sugar-coated in the sense that you have to achieve that rate at 45%. And so by doing it slowly, it doesn't hurt as much. But if we said we had a 45% tax increase today, nobody would be discussing this.
But it's different on this because in reality, for many people, their water rate is actually going to go down. For our oldest customers who use the smallest amount of water, their water bill is going to cut in half under this new system.
They guaranteed us a rate for 5 years. And like, we can't control, you say we have more control over this. Well, we can't control the cost of paving. We get an estimate. We can't control it. It ended up being twice what it is.
But we
Same
can
with the
decide
firewall.
to not pave. We can't decide to not have water.
Well, again, they don't, the corporate entity doesn't make that decision. The state does at their level. The state says, is this a justified rate increase? And whether you or I or whoever sits on the council makes that determination, it's still a rate increase. We may make it, but it doesn't mean that it's any less painful than if the state makes it down the road.
But we're paying, after 5 years, we don't have that control. And in those 5 years, we don't have control over the riders, because the riders can go up next year. And so that's a part of this thing that we always have to factor in. But after the 5 years, we lose all control.
You have several options. My role is to present these options, and if that's something that doesn't get voted in, that's fine, but it's still my responsibility to make this an option.
And you can respond to Bob, because he's talking to your points.
I also wanted to just point out, and you're welcome to respond to this too, the one thing that we didn't talk about is it would still eliminate our debt service. So that would actually be saving us roughly $339,000 a year by selling because we could pay off our debt for the fire station, debt service.
Well, actually, you wouldn't pay off the debt for the fire station, because the way that is set up, de-annexation is a possibility, and you need to have that loan. Does it have to be done through the loan?
No, it's set up as a bond, so if they de-annex, they take that bond with them.
They take that bond with them, yeah.
So that's not an issue.
No, Boyd, straighten us out. You understand this better.
I don't know that it, technically, if they de-annex, you would look at what portion of that cost should be borne by the people that de-annex.
Okay.
So it's not going to be the full amount, and I don't want to say it's unlikely, but it's
sure.
The fact that we've met our obligation makes that scenario far less likely.
Okay. So Ann, I'm sorry, we hijacked did you have any responses? The reason it's important now is because we have, at least two people on the dais who want to open up this discussion again of selling the water company. And it's on the floor, and I didn't think it would ever be water on the floor again, but
there's a lot of complexity to the water system that would be difficult to cover all this evening. The idea of retaining control, yes, Tennessee American, for example, has said that they would freeze rates for 5 years. They will not and would not be allowed by TPUC to freeze capital riders. So capital riders have been increasing 4.5% a year. That they have asked for and been approved by TPUC. They are allowed to go back for a rider increase every quarter, and at each request they're allowed to get up to, they're required to stay in single digits. So theoretically every quarter they could go 9.9%. So we don't have control over the riders. When we retain the system, we do have control over the rates that we set, and we do have control over the improvements that we make every year. We can, pardon me, my throat's getting dry. We can control the expenses within our water department. One of the reasons we're looking at $600,000 or $700,000 a year in improvements is because we'd like to improve the system, and if I say we, I mean that's town management and the water system management, would like to make the improvements faster partly because it's an inconvenience to our citizens to have water line breaks. There are actually a couple of areas within the system that have frequent breaks due to age of lines, materials used, methods of installation. I mean, you can go on and on with the list. But those breaks happen so frequently that it's an inconvenience to citizens. It keeps our water department staff just fixing things rather than actually making longer term improvements. So if we spend that money and replace, for example, all of the pipes on Dunsinane, which is a hotspot area. It's actually cheaper to replace that per foot, to replace that all at once than to keep making those repairs over and over and over again. Another issue here sorry, just lost my train of thought. It'll come back, sorry.
For every one of those reasons, having a partner that has a bigger pocket than we do makes a lot of sense. And when we're facing that ongoing potential for tax increase, whether they cover it or they can still perform those services cheaper than we can do it. They can operate it cheaper, and they can sell their own water cheaper than what we can purchase it for.
Well, we don't actually know that they can do the work cheaper. We know what it will cost us to do it. I think it's comparable to what other public systems pay.
They can buy 1 million feet of pipe at a time, and we're not going to be doing that. They can get lower rates on those kind of costs.
They
can
can't
get lower rates on some of as far as what the employee costs are as well.
They get lower rates on employee costs?
The amount of employees that they are having to spread among all the municipalities they cover is a lower cost than us servicing just one area. They're a bigger entity. They can afford to take, just like if we kept the sewer system, we would be still looking for ways of
Well,
paying for
they
them.
are a larger entity indeed. We can be a member, if we're not already, we may be. We can be a member of a co-op that buys at comparable prices. We have done some checking into those prices from a co-op perspective, and it's comparable. Part of the disadvantage of being a part of a larger system like that is that we would then be paying those riders to do work in other parts of their system. So I don't have my numbers in front of me, and I apologize. It's been a while since I've looked at those particular figures. It is actually cheaper for us to be servicing our small area and paying the costs on that than it would be for us to be part of that larger area and sharing those costs. Tennessee American is spending about $20 million a year on their Chattanooga system and has said that over the next 20 years they'll be spending $3.5 billion on that system. So we would be sharing the cost of that.
I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree with our numbers. And
Well-
I appreciate you looking into it. But in what I've looked into it, I think we come out ahead.
I think we will have to agree to disagree, and part of the disagreement is a philosophical one about how one goes about balancing a budget. Because I was brought up to say you don't spend more than you have coming in. You don't go off looking for an inheritance from Aunt Hattie to spend a lot extra.
At the same time, you don't go out and when you downsize or you have to have painful decisions, you have to look at all of the divisions and how they function. And if you can run them cheaper, doing something else, and still get the benefits and meet your obligations, I think that's something to discuss.
I would be all in favor of us balancing our operating budget, income and expenses, and if we can find places to cut and maybe balance out with a smaller tax increase, sounds good to me. And again, I thank you all for working on it.
There are some real savings in going. Bruce Bry, 1002 Arden Way. You're going to have, what is the associated with the water system on the budget?
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
The budget, the water system doesn't impact this budget.
But does that have a capital bonding system?
The water system is a separate budget. The money that comes in from ratepayers goes back into the water system. It all comes out of that budget. There's a little bit that it helps our budget. Part of Boyd's salary.
But the sale.
A little bit of mine, little Carol's, and there's actually a pilot that the
for the taxes.
water department pays to the general fund.
But it's
All right.
income, not expense.
That cost would be gone. The
No,
co-
those were all income lines.
Okay, but the other thing is that would be on a taxpayer roll, which is a big chunk with the type of money they're paying for that is not on taxpayer now. And also, the rate increase, we're going to pay that same rate increase anyway, because they're going to charge the water, and if they charge the water up, they're going to raise us, and we have to pay more. So that is not a question.
Well, we do have one advantage in that by retaining it, we have two competing water systems. And there's a big advantage to that because one company could price itself out of too high in the other companies there. And we retain that competitive advantage and own our water system.
I don't think that's the case because I think one of them is going to have some real problems. They're going to have to go back to Tennessee American anyway in the very near future because of what they're doing, what's going to happen to the spring over there and the creeks over there. They're going to get called by the state to say you're going to have to stop. So you're going to go back to Tennessee American anyway, and they're going to do the same thing. We just have a middleman that we're again funding. And you go back to the same question. Where do you go? You go to eliminate the middleman, you're going to get saving the rates. And also the thing that they have is they've got a much larger base buying things with, but they also have the equipment. Of which you got to, if you're going to hire that kind of equipment to come in there and do that on a small basis, you're going to pay a premium on it. And they've already got the equipment. So you're going to save a lot there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I promise I'll be fast again. Elizabeth Baker, 1 Carriage Hill. Just a thought. We seem to have a lot of different solutions, and then it comes to disagreements over this water system. I was wondering maybe if the 5 of you might want to put forth that motion to rescind it, and if it passes, great, let's have the conversation. If it doesn't, let's stop it. We have wasted more than an hour and a half today discussing a water system that was discussed in excess of, 47 hours of public meetings, and we're doing it again tonight. So maybe the council could decide to either reconsider selling it or not, and then move on with solutions that are actually accomplishable.
So I'll tell you what I think about your suggestion. I see the upside to it and considered that, but the downside to it is that it shuts down conversation. And if anyone else wants to talk about it, this is what we get paid the big bucks for. Then.
Oh, okay, Dad, go ahead. That's my neighbor.
Yeah. I'm Daphne Kirksey, 1109 Applewood Circle, and I'm actually here as a citizen, but I do also work for Tennessee American Water, and that's not what I was planning to speak on today at all, but I just do want to correct something that Ms. Haygood stated that was incorrect. She said that we can change our rates, our riders, quarter to quarter, and that is not correct. It's done on an annual basis, not quarterly. And the other thing is, in the RFP, part of the requirement was, or one of the requests was that that rates remains flat for 5 years. And so the riders would apply. That's pipes in the ground. It's improvements in the water treatment process. For example, we're putting in a third pipe into the Tennessee River that delivers water to Signal Mountain in North Chattanooga. So that's something that you all, that the town of Signal Mountain definitely benefits from. But anyhow, I say all that to say that we had calculated it to be about a 71 cent impact annually, because it's usually at between a 3 and a 3.5% increase on what we predicted the bill would be for the first 5 years. So anyhow, saying all that, I don't want to debate the water system. Why I am here as a citizen is to ask you all, in one of your early budget discussions, you were talking about the stormwater fees. And so I know that's still something that's out there. And, you know, what will that be something that you still will have to vote on coming soon? And I think that you all had asked the...
Do you mean sanitation fee?
No, stormwater fee. Yes. And one of your budget discussions, you kind of tabled it and said, let's come to this later. Let's get past the whole budget thing, because it was part of the discussion, that you kind of set it aside.
I think the question from that was what the stormwater fee was going to be. Right. And we didn't have a final answer from staff yet. Right. Is that where you're going?
Yes. So I want to know like what increase we can expect with that.
Well, we don't have that answer.
Okay.
Because when we got into it further and looked at how it was originally set up, we identified some issues where some changes have been made, where they increased the minimum fee, but they also increased the minimum or the square footage that was associated with that. Mm-hmm. And we started seeing some of the same issues that we really had with our old water rate structure. So I think, and we haven't had an opportunity to discuss that, but we probably need to go through the same process and look at what our budget is, what our capital improvement needs are, and see if MTAS could come in and help us set something. Because what I didn't want to do is change it and then realize that it wasn't right. So we want to make sure we are where we are. So
I have a question on the stormwater fee. Does that include the repaving, or does that come out of the repaving budget?
No.
So the stormwater just fixes the stormwater itself, and then the town is on the hook for the paving?
Right.
The reconstruction. Okay. That's all I had.
Can I say one thing to you?
Sure.
This tea and this water, it's all Tennessee American Water.
Thank you. I've been drinking mine too.
I have nothing against Tennessee American Water Company.
Thank you.
It's just, I'm glad that we own our water company, and it's a benefit, it's an asset of our town. So it's nothing against Tennessee American at all. I happily drink it and will continue to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Don. And hey, good again. I would also, Daphne, I would also like to say I have nothing against Tennessee American Water as a company. I just think it's appropriate to keep our water system.
Now I'm checking. Okay, we went through long process, public meetings. Now, were we able to gather what the citizens of this town wanted? Did we come by the knowledge of what they wanted? So if we did, then I wonder why the two people that still want to bring it up and sell it, why would they want to find the face of their voters, their citizens? Because I've heard both of them say that they want to represent their citizens. I think they ought to back off and let the decision stand.
Dick Graham, 405 James Boulevard. I think we're all at the head exploding stage out here. You know, this is getting no closer to getting a budget than we were 3 hours ago or whatever it's been. You know, we have 2 council members that want to sell the water company. If that wants to be revisited, why don't you just make a motion to revisit that? And if it fails, then we're done with that right now. And from what I understand, we can't impact this budget this year anyway. You know, you can't vote right now to sell it. We've got to come up with a budget. And let's hear some things. All of you have had this budget for weeks or months, whatever it is. We hear from one council member that she's gone through it line by line. let's find where all these gigantic budget cuts are and be on with it. I don't think they're there. I think we're in a situation where we have certain things, that fire station, all the people in that fire station, those are things that we can't get rid of. So unless you can come up with an amount of budget cuts that equal that, I don't see what we're doing here. You know, we're not getting anywhere. And maybe you can cut 50,000 now. Maybe we don't buy lawnmowers. That's not going to solve the big problem. And I think what I'm hearing is the solution is, unfortunately, a tax increase. And I don't want to pay it either. But we have to pay for the things that we have. And we have a fire station, and we have employees there that we have to pay for. And we also have employees that need raises. I've looked at some of the what some employees are getting paid, and there's been a lot of discussion about minimum wage, what the minimum wage really should be now, somewhere around $15. Some of our employees are getting about like $18 an hour. And that's really something to consider. They're doing a good job out there. We've heard everybody say they're doing a great job. Well, let's compensate them for a great job. And like, you know, the water department, I'll use an example. When that pipe breaks at 2 a.m. in a February morning, and you want water when you get up in the morning, those guys are out there fixing that pipe when it's freezing cold. I'd challenge any of us to go out there and do that. We wouldn't, you know, but those guys are doing it, and they deserve to be paid for it. So I'm done.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Denise Thomas from 425 Timberlinks Drive. I've been to a few of them, of the budget meetings, and listened to you on YouTube. It doesn't sound like we've come to lowering it. Am I correct? Have we done any cuts? Nothing?
No.
The cuts were done.
But we're still at 22.
No, we're a little below that, but that's.
21.5.
Right.
Okay.
So, yes.
Okay. I'm looking further out. I'm not going to bring up the water or anything like that, but what other ways do we have to generate money for the town? I mean, other than taxing the citizens, what other?
We can raise non-resident fees, which we haven't talked about. We can try to contract with the county and Walden for services. We just can't do it right now.
Stimulate commercial growth. You know, tax revenue, you know, but we're going to have to lay the groundwork to make that happen.
Yeah.
And that's going to take work.
Yeah, because I'm thinking 2 years, people are going to need raises again. We're going to look at another 20-something%. And it's just a never-ending.
That's kind of how I'm a long-term, you know, looking at the long view. And it's something that I talked about when I was campaigning a lot, that I think Signal Mountain has it's got so much to offer, but we also kind of need a better town vibe that's sort of my expression I use all the time when I talk about it. And I think that there are things that we can do, and we're working on doing with some of our capital investment with sidewalks and things like that to kind of stimulate, you know, pedestrian and bike traffic and lighting and, you know, places for people to congregate. And I think that would spark investment. I think Signal Mountain is a safe bet. It's an affluent community, but it's also sort of diverse. And we've got a great quality of life up here. So if we can do it in a smart way that is in keeping with the complexion of our community, then we'll generate more tax revenue, and hopefully we won't have to keep going back to the citizens to raise property taxes. That's my philosophy on it, and that's what I want to be working on. I mean, I'm listening to all of this, and it's really hard to have to, you know, look at you and say, gosh, we might have to raise your taxes. But I'm not saying I want to stop talking about this because it's so much fun, but but I really want to kind of be able to talk about what is in our future and how can we build that roadmap that's going to spark some investment.
Yeah. I know my taxes have went up tremendously just in the past couple of years. And then I know we've got Hamilton County tax, and then I don't really know about the sanitation fee or the water fee that's about to take place. It didn't seem to affect my water bill on this last month, but I don't know, is it in place yet? Where
No.
it had
No, and it depends on which water company you get your water from, because there are
Town
two.
of Signal.
Yeah, so
Okay.
then you'll see 15%. No, actually, depending on how much water you use, you could see it go down.
Okay.
Because this one does encourage and reward conservation.
Well, I'm playing with y'all to look at other ways to generate money. I know we've had a lot of houses being built. I don't know if you can, tax the builders or the people that come in and inspect to get money. I would think that we're booming up here and would be great with all this property, and, our schools are going to explode, and with children, we've got so many new kids up here, and look at other ways other than the people, because we are the mountain. We live here. We love our place, but it's going to be to where we can't afford to live in our own home, So, I don't know.
Well,
I don't know where you two look. I'm just suggesting.
Yeah. And I think it's important for us, as we talk about percentages, to talk about what that actually means on a house. So on a $300,000 house, do you recall what the numbers are? I mean, it's in the neighborhood of, on a $390,000 house, I think it was $200-something for 1 year. On a $150,000 house, and mine's closer to one than the other, we're in the hundreds of something dollars, for 1 year. And I'm a self-employed person. I'm not a wealthy person. My wife and I are very conservative. We have one car between us, to give you an idea. The cheapest car we could buy. And I live frugally. But yet, in order to pay for the things, the lifestyle that I have here is better than it's been in my entire life.
We have a great life up here.
We do.
Our kids are safe and all that. We live on a budget. I have a 1 monthly income that comes in. My husband drives a 97 vehicle. We are very frugal ourselves. But like I said, our taxes have went up tremendously, not only from the town, but also Hamilton County. It's the two combined when raising at the same time.
That hurts.
Yeah, that really hurts.
Yeah.
Where I may get $10, $15 raise a month, that doesn't, and my husband may get a 3% raise with his job. I'm just saying it hurts the people that are living tightly.
Do you get why the sanitation fee wasn't a good idea? Because the sanitation fee costs people at the lower end of the incomes and home and house size and all that significantly more than it does as you move up. The tax, while none of us want taxes, taxation spreads it out. And the main loss of the tax that started lots of towns needing to do this was the tax that mainly went to people of higher income. If we had gone to the sanitation fee, it would have done, it's a regressive tax, the greatest amount on the people of the lowest income, which also doesn't seem fair. None of it seems fair if you don't want the taxes to go up. It seems fair that something is being forced on you, and I don't want it, but we also have a town that we have to run, and we have people that we have to take care of who are employees. We have streets that need to be maintained, and we're behind on that. There's just expenses associated with living, and it's gotten more expensive.
But like I said, my concern is in 2 years, they're going to need raises again, and that comes from us. So I hope we can find a way, and I'm not saying water. I'm just saying some way that you can find a way to generate more funds, because this is going to continue. Everybody wants a raise. Usually they want it yearly. But that's just my concern. Okay. Is this going to be a repeated thing every couple of years? Especially with the hall tax being gone. Seems like that really helped our community or town out. So anyway,
all right.
That's all I had to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? I'm going to pick this up and hit that thing really fast. Done.
I think it's good that we had those discussions, because had we just voted on this without any of this, I think that would have been kind of deleterious to the process of understanding. So I'm glad we've had these discussions.
Good. So we're to that place where it's up to us to decide if there's some way to change where we are or to vote on where we are. Can we, yeah, I've talked more than anybody and I don't like that, so. Suggestions?
Well, I had a thought. And it's driven really by the idea of we're adjusting certain managers' salary based on a position that has not yet been filled and on a dollar amount that has been given to us by a consultant. However, do you then, prior to even making a hire, adjust everyone's numbers by 10 to 12% in most cases and 22% or so on another? I'd also like to see that additional rec position removed unless and until we come up with an agreement with the county to do that. Now, does it mitigate the tax increase? Maybe a little bit, a couple of cents, a penny, a penny and a half. But
Yeah, that one doesn't actually change anything, but it just puts us in a position where we can talk about it before it happens. I made a motion for that a couple weeks ago.
I slept through that, I guess.
Oh, okay.
It's neutral, though. I was for taking that out, too, if it was going to save us money, but it doesn't save us money. It balances out. And Boyd, if you want to explain that, the rec.
It's simply in the budget to allow us to move forward if we're able to do so. So,
but if we take it out,
as I said before, if we take it out, we'll have to do a budget amendment to put it back in and all of that. So I'm frankly fine either way. Putting it in just set the stage so we could move forward, be a little more agile as we work through the process, because there's still a lot of work to be done on it. So.
But do we save $30,000 if we take it out?
It does not change our budget to revenue scenario at all.
Okay.
Help. Right. Assuming that really works.
Yeah,
But-
my
but
question
the-
was, and this is not, don't think of Boyd as Boyd, think of the town manager's position. Should the town manager change or whatever? If we, and I called Harry to verify this, if we vote this in within this budget, we can't then, he can make the hire. The town manager can make the hire. Even if we didn't have discussion. I have every reason to believe we would have the discussion and, talk the whole thing through. But it's making a decision. It's almost similar to what I think Elizabeth said earlier about you're making a staffing and administrative decision within a budget. And I'm a little uncomfortable with that. I'd rather remove it too. And so that's, as we talk about how this thing looks, we can add that too.
But
It is.
changing the pay adjustment equation, though, to just a flat 5% across the board so that everyone's treated equally. Again, we haven't hired a water person. We don't know whether we'll have to pay 75 or 79. It's been suggested 79, but that should have a positive impact.
So one way we could do that is say it's 5% across the board and ask that the personnel committee get together and talk about this again, talk about the water department person. And I'm in agreement with you. Neither one of us are in agreement with what the manager recommended. So I think he needs to get to make his case, I think.
So I just want to make sure I understand. You're saying we take out the water position person?
No.
What do you?
that right now, there's a group of folks that are getting raises in addition to the 5% because they're being pay adjusted to meet.
Right, what Elizabeth, okay.
Right.
You're
And-
talking about that, okay.
But then just reverting to a straight 5% across the board for
Okay.
everybody, and not even consider the water department situation.
For
until
now.
that's-
I agree with that. I mean, it saves about 25,000.
It's getting close to 1 cent.
I mean,
But I think we
nipping
should
at the
hear.
heels at 29.
Yeah.
Shouldn't we hear from the town manager as to, I mean, that's his job to tell
Yeah.
us if we're making a mistake, if that happens.
That's gonna be
The
hard.
question then is, how do we set the budget for that position? Because, I mean, if we don't have a budget set for that, I'm not sure how we advertise the position. And if we set a budget for that, then you then have the comparable. The potential conflict with how things are aligned now. So that's.
So one suggestion could be ask the personnel committee, along with staff, to consider creating another level that's specifically for this, if that's a possibility. Or recognizing that we might be creating a problem that will have to be addressed down the road and start working to figure out a way to address that down the road.
And advertise a position within a range of 70 to 79,000 rather than just an absolute.
Right, well, that would be the intent, but given the way the system works, and I have no problem with that, again, like I said earlier, don't take this as an argument, it's just a discussion. But that's generally how it would be advertised with a range, and setting that range is part of this process. So if that range is higher than an existing scale, then that brings up, the question. And again, if we're raising the bar for that position, and we're going to require experience and certifications and all, bringing that up makes sense. But then we have always looked at, and to some degree, tried to compensate comparatively to a skill level. And when you have department heads that have 30-plus years' experience and outstanding credentials and have lengthy tenures with the town, and again, I'm just simply arguing my position in that that's my concern, is that the negative impact of potentially bringing somebody in above what we're paying long-term employees.
And I completely understand your logic there, Bo. But we're essentially establishing the rate for other department managers at the very upper end of that scale at 79 something. And we don't know what we're going to pay for. But yet, in advance of that, we're actually taking folks all the way up to the top.
I understand what you're saying. That 79 is market for that position. So and at this level, you generally do have some latitude when you're bringing somebody in an administrative position. Generally, we would look at bringing somebody in one notch below that at the most. And what we're looking at is on the current scale, the other department heads are above market. And if we change that scale so that market is that 79, that's what they're not staying where they are on the scale. They're coming back to that market and then we hire somebody in at perhaps one notch below them. So it is raising them up considerably, you're right. But I just wanted to clarify that we're not bringing them in at the top of the scale, we're just looking at that market. And my concern is ultimately if those employees are considered and appropriately considered, I'll just leave it at that. The process by which we do that, ultimately it's all your decision. My job is to tell you what I think is important and what we need to consider. And I think for over a year, I've been very consistent in that case. So
It seems like we're below market almost every category on this sheet right here.
ultimately, in just about all the positions we looked at, and we tried to do a cross-section, we're low. And that's what, in general, that's what the 5%'s meant to adjust, to keep us somewhat competitive. So we're keeping good people. And this other scenario is a bit of a complication of that. When you look at how we've always operated, how we've looked at these positions, my concern is the negative impact on good administrators that we have. How we ultimately get there is y'all's call. I'm expressing my concern.
Sure. So it sounds like what we have on the table is potentially amending the budget to take out the revenue neutral rec director's position and cap the raises at 5% across the board.
For everyone.
Is anyone prepared to make a motion for that? Or what do you have?
I'll move.
I'll second.
Can you say the motion again?
Well, the motion is to accept on second reading the budget with the amendment of taking out the revenue neutral rec director's position and capping raises at 5% across the board for everyone.
That's it?
With the caveat that you know, that rec situation goes out unless and until the town reaches an agreement.
Right, and that's in there. And also, I don't think we have to say anything about the water guide because that's still going to happen also. I mean, doesn't matter if that's there or not, so.
But we're voting on the second reading of the budget.
No.
Sure.
But to clarify, to answer real quick, with those amendments, we're not voting on any budget. Because we would have to redraft that budget and then come back for first reading.
So you can't, okay. You
So we're
can't-
just voting to amend
Just
it.
to be clear, you can't amend on second reading a budget?
Then
or
it's
an
not
ordinance?
second reading. I'm sorry. He was looking at you.
Yeah.
What did you say?
I said then it's not second reading.
Right.
He's right.
What he said?
Yes. Yes, you haven't had a first reading on
Okay.
what you might end up passing or amending.
Right,
Your
so-
amendment.
Let me withdraw my motion.
Yeah, so if we're going to do that, let's propose some additional.
Is this being tied into the second reading of the final budget?
No, it's what he just said.
That's what we were just clarifying.
We're in a position to have a second reading on the budget. If amendments are made or changes are made, then that can't happen, and we would have to draft the budget that includes those changes and come back for first reading at the July meeting.
And that would put us at the end of July, having a new budget, and we'd have to do the continuation thing.
Yeah.
Should we just vote on the
That's never
continuation?
clean.
Right.
And you've got that on for second reading tonight. Anyway, I'm not suggesting anything, but that might get passed tonight. The continuation budget might get passed tonight.
And the continuation budget,
it's-
because I wasn't here at the last meeting, is,
If you don't have the next year's budget passed by the end of June, you can continue last year's budget
That's
as
all that
long
is.
as you have.
Okay, that's what I thought that
done
was. I just
so.
want to make sure I understood it, okay.
And that was done at the last town council meeting, just in case, for safety.
In case the second reading doesn't pass.
Correct.
Or we
Okay.
don't do it at all,
We don't do what?
the second reading. We don't have to do the second reading tonight. We can table that. There's other options.
What would be the purpose of tabling it and not just voting it down and continuing?
I don't know. I don't have that plan. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious.
So, did you withdraw your motion because of not wanting to go into July?
To the end of July. We're essentially going into
Yeah.
August.
Well, any change we make to this is going to require that.
Right. So I'm just saying, forget my idea
Okay.
of making a change. And let's vote on the budget that we already have ahead in front of us.
Is there any way that we can amend this? Is there-
No, there's not. So if we're
Well, let
going to
me
make
ask the
cuts, we got to
question.
make them now, or we're going to be voting on the budget as is, which is a 21.5% tax increase.
Let me ask the question again. Is there a way procedurally moving forward, we vote this budget now, and then we do a budget amendment to change the pay so that it pulls back to 5% afterwards, just like we do a budget changes all the time? Why couldn't that happen?
You could always do an amended budget, I
Yeah.
would think.
Yeah, I guess you can amend the budget after it's passed.
Right.
The question will be, will the intent be to also change the associated and established tax rate? Once that's set, changing that's more problematic.
What's the difference of about almost a penny? Right? That's
What's the difference?
The difference in, and I'd have to get this from our
1 penny
accounting
is
gurus.
29,000.
What I'm getting to is the difference between pay adjusting everyone based on the water director's proposed salary minus cap
It would-
5%.
It would be about 1.5, a little more cents those adjustments are around $44,000 total.
Okay.
If you're already doing the 5%,
It's more.
then making the other adjustments are about 44,000 on top of that.
We could also
So-
make that adjustment also, couldn't we? What's the rule for when the tax rate has to be set?
It has to be turned into the county, no later, is my understanding, than mid-September, and that's really pushing into the limit.
Right, okay. I mean, so it sounds like that's feasible also. We could pass it, and then we could adjust it down 1.5%. Excuse me, 1.5 cents.
Because the tax bills go out in October.
Right.
So it has to be established.
Yeah. I mean, of course, there's no guarantee that we made that adjustment. There is no guarantee. We can't make that decision tonight until the budget is passed. I'm getting the raised eyebrow of concern.
The whole purpose of this process is, say the whole purpose, a primary focus is to determine how we can minimize the tax increase.
Mhm.
And in the discussion we just had about waiting until we see how it plays out with the water department before we decide what we're going to do with the other positions. And if we take all of the funds for those other adjustments out and we set a tax rate and that goes out, by the time all that plays out, we have a fixed revenue position that in no latitude.
Yeah, but that's assuming that you raise everyone else's rate based on what that position comes in at. And as I've said, I've never been convinced that that's necessary, and I know you and I disagree on that, but I'm also convinced that in a tight budget year, when we're asking citizens to take on a tax increase, that a 5% across the board increase is pretty darn good for most folks.
I have never argued that point. And
I think it's sufficient for this year.
So let's make that
I
change.
mean, I think it's sufficient for this year too. I just, I
we can't
totally
just
get
make
what
it.
you're talking about.
Well, we
but-
have to vote down.
But I also think, it's just, I'm just not totally comfortable with it.
With what?
With giving these kind of significant raises. I mean, like 12, an average of whatever, 10%, 12, 24. It's just, I think the optics of that are going to barbecue us. And I feel funny about it. I don't know. I understand what you're saying, and I think that they need to be paid competitively. But I'm totally comfortable with a 5% across the board. Like, I think that's generous. I think it's fair. It's timely. It's good. I mean, maybe we can take a look at this next year or make an amendment or maybe, do some merit-based raises and kind of, drill down a little bit more deeply into each scenario and kind of justify it. I mean, it's hard to say that because I respect every single person that's looking at getting this increase, and I think that they deserve to be paid fairly for a day's work. I mean, they perform really important tasks for us. I'm just not comfortable with this degree of increase to their salaries. I feel like 5% is generous. It's higher than the inflation rate or the cost of living. And it's something I want to continue to look at, and I think, we need to continue having this conversation in the future, but I'm just not comfortable with it right now.
can I say something? And, when somebody says, with all due respect, what they're fixing to say is probably not going to sound like.
Yeah.
And a term's been used several times about being, it's generous. That is not what any of this is about. I just want to make that very clear. The focus is on retention and paying a fair market wage and taking care of the town by solidifying our excellent workforce. That's the bottom line. So again,
I know.
When you use a phrase like that, it
No,
just
I
kind
know,
of
you're
goes
right.
contrary
That's
to
a
that.
poor choice of words, because I agree. I think that we do need to be in line with what other communities are paying. And somebody sent me an email today, was like, you said that people should be paid commensurate, to what other people are being paid in other municipalities. And how do you support that? How could you say that? Have you done research? And I was like, wrote back and I said, no, you're right. I mean, I personally have not studied what other people are making in other municipalities. I got my information from our town manager, who explained it all to me. It makes perfect logical sense on paper. I understand it. I just think that the blowback that we are getting in terms of the amount of this tax increase I'm having a hard time dealing with it, to tell you the truth, because I just didn't know that we were going to be in this situation, So we're kind of sort of backed into a corner a little bit, I feel like, on this budget. And I know it's been coming for a long time, and there are a lot of circumstances that have brought us up to this moment in time. And I'm just trying to do what feels right, for me personally, so. But I understand what you're saying, Boyd, and I respect that.
So, looking at at not doing the pay adjusted, but keeping the 5%, I think still solidifies our workforce, because it's the lower end of the wage scale that's going to tend to be more likely to be the ones that are picked, as opposed to the folks that are upper in the middle. And if you asked me to support that, I probably would stumble because, you know, you don't want to talk about specific people in specific positions. But we've got a good workforce now that will be appreciative of a 5% raise.
Well,
And if I was
like I said, it's
yeah.
difficult when you have these discussions to sound,
I know.
you know, whether it's 2% or 5, anytime you say just or we're only,
Right.
it sounds bad, and that is absolutely not how it's meant.
Right.
So I get that. And it is a very positive move for the council to approve a 5%
Yeah.
raise. And
So our options on the table now, we could call up a motion. I mean, we could move on to the second reading, vote it up or down.
But we need to vote it down in order to make these changes, right?
Well, we would be proposing something new. We don't have to vote it down. We can just propose something new and just not vote also, and it would just be out there. Or table it, I guess, if we wanted, so I'm saying. But my only hesitance to move towards that is I want to make sure that we've got a road plan going forward, because it's 9:15 and folks are going to start getting tired. But we've got to solve this. And as you said, Bill, I mean, we're not careful, we're looking at August.
For what it's worth, and this is not a suggestion, last year's council passed the budget on second reading on August 13th.
Cool.
Not suggesting
I
you
didn't
do
remember
it.
You know what, as I recall, that was the last meeting that we could pass it and still get the tax rate in. So I'm thinking it may be mid-August instead of mid-September.
Oh, okay. Forgetting the tax rate.
Forgetting the tax
Yeah.
rate,
Well, if we pass what's on the agenda this evening, we can do an amended budget.
Yes.
Can we not?
I'm sorry, say again?
If we pass the budget as it is presented this evening, we can, next month, do an amended budget.
But then what's the point of passing the budget if we're just going to do an amended budget? I mean,
Well,
It gets us in place to move
Yeah.
into the fiscal year on time.
the problem is, though, yeah, we could even amend the tax rate. That's right. So we
Well,
could
I would-
solve for both problems.
I kind of want to go back to some of the details. I would like to raise our non-residence fees to $50 across the board. If we do that, I have to look at my phone. We can generate 14,000 for, I think that's basketball, 7,800 from baseball, 2,400 for another sport, because I didn't write it down. I'm trying to get into my phone. Anyway, those are the numbers, and if I can get in here, I'll be more specific. Golly.
Isn't the part of the problem of doing that it doesn't change the budget?
We have
To that degree?
projected how
Because-
much we're going to make in sports, right? And so that changes that projection. And it's based on the numbers from last year, so it's pretty, we know exactly how many non-residents played in basketball, and if we raise it by that much, we would generate 14,000 more than what's already in the budget. I'm in my phone.
Right. It has. as
I'm
we've-
just saying there's some changes that we can make in addition if we're going to be making changes. That's one. And then.
Why don't we talk about that one?
Okay. Well, let me give you the specifics. So, this was in my statement, so I'm sorry, it's on my phone. Okay, so basketball had 280 non-resident players. $50 each raises 14,000. Baseball had 156. That would be 7,800. Softball had 48 at $50 a head would be 2,400. Flag football had 85. That would generate another 4,250. Swim team had no numbers. They don't collect non-resident fees.
Who doesn't?
Swim team. And when I was at the pool the other day, I don't know that the raise that we did a couple years ago went into effect, because when I asked how much the pool pass was, they said 200 for non-residents, and it's actually 300. And then when I asked if they were being collected, like I asked the swim team, you know, what do you guys pay as a non-resident, and they don't pay anything. So. Or it's not being collected.
The swim team pays a flat rate.
Flat rate, so
For
this, the Signal Mountain residents are basically paying more, double, because if they're paying a flat rate, there's no non-resident fee. So Signal Mountain's being taxed for it and for the maintenance of the pool, and then also paying the fee to the town to use the pool. So there's no non-resident fee.
Okay, we've got about 4 or 5 different things going. Can we back up for just a second? You gave me a number for a league that's 156 participants.
Which league?
I don't know, that's what
That
I'm asking.
was baseball.
Baseball.
That's just non-resident participants.
156 non-residents, $50.
$50 each,
And that generates,
7,800.
right. But we're already collecting 30, I believe. So
So
only.
starting fall ball, we would have to go up to 50.
But it doesn't.
Right, but only $20 is additional revenue.
No,
So-
that,
Unless you're going to go up by
That's no-
$50,
yes, we're going to go up by $50, but our resident fee.
so it'll be $80.
I guess.
Okay. At
Let
that-
me back up, because I want to make sure, I think that I've got the non-resident fee. I don't think it's 30. What did he tell me? Let me see, Mark. What? It's 35 per family.
Okay, so that's what was throwing me. If you're talking about increasing to $50, in that scenario, then your additional revenue is $15 times the 156. So you're not generating 7,800. And if you're talking about,
It would increase to 14,000
right, it would increase
from whatever.
to that
I don't have my
much,
budget in front of
right.
me.
So, but
I see that.
if you have 156 times 15, that's $2,300, $2,340. So I just wanted to make sure I was understanding what.
Well, we can
you
talk
were
about it.
proposing.
I mean,
Sure, sure.
there's a lot of maintenance that goes into, we've had several people talk about how the town of Signal Mountain is carrying the burden for the maintenance of a lot of the mountain, but we're all using it. So at some point, we've got to make changes to where maybe we can go back and start that dialogue with Walden and the county and say, we don't want to do this either. They're our neighbors, but at the same time, we're the ones looking at a 22% tax increase. Nobody else is. So we have to make hard decisions to keep from having this tax increase. That's my only point. We can disagree, I just want to talk about it. We haven't even talked about non-resident fees, and we're about to vote on a budget, unless you did when I wasn't here.
I think we've mentioned it every time we've talked about
But we've
this.
never talked about specifics.
Because the
What does it
council-
go to?
Because the council generally does that, once the budget is done, because you're getting real numbers in.
But our budget
Mhm.
is forecasting what these different sports leagues will bring in.
Right, so are you proposing that you go up $50 on a $35 fee to play baseball?
At least.
For a non-resident, to go
Yeah.
up to $85 to play baseball?
No, at least 50 is what I was proposing.
That's why I was trying to clarify.
But let's talk about it. I'll go up to 80. I mean, I would rather do that than, we've got to find ways to keep the tax increase. And every citizen here has said, look for ways, look for ways. That's a way. You may not like it, but let's at least talk about it.
So if you did that, you said a total of $14,000 if you went up $50
Not
on
looked at this in
everybody,
a week.
right?
General. Are you talking to me? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
you said it would be about 14,000, I think is what you said, if you went up $50 on every person who pays a non-resident fee.
That's for one sport.
For the
That would just be
library,
for-
for all the.
I didn't have numbers. I couldn't find, some of the things were a little fuzzy, like the MAC and the library. I don't know what those fees were.
But baseball's a good example, 35, so you go to $85. And in all the others, and you come up with $14,000, that's a half a cent. Is that balanced with any sort of reasonableness as to whether or not that's a fair fee and an affordable fee? And recognizing also that if you did price people out of playing, you make it cost more to play locally too. Because people who come in are also paying. You make the leagues cost more, not less, if you do this incorrectly.
So let's do it correctly. Let's talk about it. I mean, what do you propose?
For sports fees,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so insignificant that it shouldn't be discussed
But a
right
half
now.
a cent
It
is
should have
not
been-
insignificant. A cent, like this is how you do little cuts that become several cents.
I think $50 on a $35 fee is not something I could ever support. And so if you said, let's say we're going up, taxes ended up 20%, well, if it's a $35 fee, 20% of that is $7. So you go up to $42 if you want to make it be equivalent. And so when you start looking at those numbers, if you go up with that equivalency, you're going to end up with an eighth of a cent. And it's something that council needs to do after we determine what the tax rate is and go up at least that amount. But it's not enough that's going to change this budget.
I think collectively it would be. I mean, and we're not talking just about baseball. If that's a fraction of us, we've got several sports. We've got one sport that's not collecting any. You know, there are other cuts that we can do too.
Can we, Harry, can we like...
Can we get to 100,000 in cuts?
Can we, if something is on the table, can we say, let's do a vote right now as to whether or not we want to consider this anymore?
Well, you don't have a vote till somebody makes a motion.
All right, so if I make a motion that we do not raise fees $50 and that we wait and raise them the equivalent of what our tax increase is, or more if we chose. Is that possible to do?
Well, you wouldn't make a motion
To
not
not.
to do something.
Right.
First of all.
Do you want to make a motion that we raise fees for baseball $50 or for all sports $50?
Is this an amendment of the budget?
No. This is just so that we can move forward, so that we don't.
But shouldn't we have a more holistic conversation about youth rec sports? Like, isn't that conversation coming? Because it's in the budget, but it's like, you know, revenue neutral. So
Just that one position's revenue neutral.
the position is, but also the whole trajectory, kind of the whole landscape of how youth rec sports is managed and run and what it looks like, and fields and all that is like,
It seems like that should be a part
It's
of that
like-
conversation.
Well, it's revenue producing.
it is revenue producing. And I mean, I agree,
Yeah.
like we probably could raise some non-resident fees for that to enhance whatever is coming down the road. I'm just not, like, I think that should sort of feed into the more broad conversation about.
My reasoning for bringing that up is because I think those conversations need to happen before we do a permanent tax increase. Like you don't go back, you don't lower taxes. If we agree to this and we go up 21.5% in taxes, regardless of the reasons, that's what our tax rate's going to stay. And the trickle down years from now is going to impact our property values. There is no reason. It would be one thing if we were an entire mountain and the whole mountain was being raised, and then there's really no options. People, there's not a benefit to living in the town of Signal. Why not
with
move
that.
to Walden? I mean, I'm having a huge tax increase because of this personally. I don't know if I can afford my own house. So, I mean, I just think that we have to be really mindful of making a permanent decision and then saying, oh, well, then we'll go back and change it. Or, you know, maybe then we'll look at it. If it's 1 cent
Well,
and we can save the citizens 1 cent, I think we owe them that. And we don't raise it that 1 cent because we're never going down. We're going up.
But that's not proposing anything specific. The thing that you propose specifically right now is going up $50.
Well, I wasn't done. I
Well,
want
then-
to have a conversation about things that we can
Go to the next one then.
do. All right.
One of the
I'm
things
so
you mentioned
tired.
last
I'm
time
so
was
sorry.
raising 1%. Like, I remember the 4 you had last time.
Well, it's
One
not-
was selling the water company. One was increasing our revenue just by changing the number by 1%. Is that still on the table for you?
I'll do, I think that we covered that, and you disagreed.
So it's-
I mean, I think we could go ahead and make that, but I think I'm outnumbered. I cannot pull up my phone, it's driving me crazy. I wish I'd printed this out. Okay, other suggestions, and these are minor, but they add up, and I think we had citizens ask us to do this. I don't think we need to I think we can save $16,000 on not buying the mowers. I think that there is a $5,000.
Wait, let's get them down. So you want to take 16,000 off and not buy the mowers?
That's just a suggestion. There's a PR fund for the MAC for $5,500 and $2,500 in piano tuning. I don't think we have to do that this year. There's a $5,000 addition budgeted for the library.
So pianos get tuned?
Yes,
because
but
pianos
shouldn't
go out of
those,
tune.
right, but should that be a town function?
That's the way it generally works, yes. The center does it, and the center brings in some money.
Do we own the pianos?
Yeah.
Okay. Like I said, we've been asked to make cuts.
Right.
I'm the only one who's had the guts to bring about actual cuts, and I'm getting filleted for it. I'm not saying I want to do that.
Nobody's being filleted,
Well,
actually.
I'm just
but
saying,
we
like,
have to stop and talk about these and decide if we're going to do them or not, because just talking doesn't do anything.
I hear you, Dan, but I feel like every time I talk, you cut me off, and it's very frustrating. That's how it feels. It may not be your intention, but that's how it feels. I'm trying to come up with solutions. You may not like the solutions. You don't have to agree. But I think we have to have conversations on things that we can cut. Vote it down, but at least we're talking about ways to try to save our citizens money. And that's all I'm trying to do.
Well, let's keep going. What else do you have?
I don't know what this is for, but there's a $5,000 for a building addition to the library. What is that for? $5,000 building addition to the library? Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying, so we can take that one off.
But why did you have it on there? I mean, gotcha. Okay.
I was gonna, if we're not gonna talk about non-residence fees, but I was going to propose that we go up again on non-resident pool fees. We can raise gym rental fees, pavilion rental fees,
How much?
library fees. I don't know what they are currently. These are just suggestions, like I said.
But in order for us to propose them into a budget, we have to have numbers.
How much are our pavilion rental fees?
We don't necessarily have to, I agree completely about the non-res fees, that we need to move on that. But do we necessarily have to do that as part of the budget?
If they're revenue producing, which, am I looking at this wrong? I mean, if they're revenue producing, then we don't have to raise taxes to the level that we're proposing raising taxes. So why wouldn't we do that?
Okay, that's the point.
Well, because you set fees based on other things than that, and you don't try to balance the budget by not tuning pianos. I mean, there are things that, it's just like I mentioned with Mr. Francescan, I mean, he doesn't want taxes raised either, but he absolutely wants Marion and Driver Field redone. I mean, that's a cost to taxpayers, even if it's coming out of the general fund, even if we have a park grant for it. There are things that we have to do, and we do them for other reasons. Every decision is not made about taxes. Some are just basic quality of life things that you do in order to run a town. Some have to do with morale. Some have to, it's just, we have a town to run. And it would be great if when you have something, and I'm not cutting you off at all, Amy, but if you're going to mention gym fees and that we need to change them, we need to either say, if you want them changed now, we have to have suggestions. I mean, real numbers.
I agree. I mean, I don't have them. But those are suggestions that we can talk about, and that's the purpose of the meeting. So, there are more cuts I think that we can do that I mean, that's just what I got through so far.
Well, what are they?
I haven't finished going through it, but at this point, like, I'm fried. So if you're not willing to entertain some of these cuts that I've talked about, then we can move on. Does anyone else have any cuts that they've seen through the budget? Do you have any places
I was
you think?
involved ahead of time and have been involved in this thing for a while. I think what we have is a reasonable budget as presented by the manager, as has been worked out over time as we've talked about these things. So
No additional cuts than what staff already did?
I actually added something. I added paving because I think that we have to think 2 years from now. Our tax base doesn't just support us this year in this budget. It supports us going forward. And we are talking about a cut of the difference in the salaries. That is an additional cut. And that's a fairly significant
Thank you for that.
cut.
So you added paving to the budget?
Part of the...
And how much was that?
Yeah. 238,000 as opposed to the full 338,000 because we didn't pave at all this year other than repairs. And this helps catch us up. And if you take a look at 268.
268, but once we pave that road, it's paved, right?
Well, it's not that road. Paving is done on a rotation. This isn't for a specific road.
Once we catch up on that 268, we're caught up, right? But yet we
Yes.
have a permanent tax increase moving forward.
But the next year, we have a deficit of that exact same amount. And this is to prevent us from having a deficit in 2021. Because we have to think of more than just one budget year. We don't want to raise taxes again next year.
Well, I think we should cut the paving. That's a huge savings.
Is it
But we can wait a year.
We've
I mean,
already
I
waited
just-
a year.
We can wait another one. That's 9.2 cents.
Yep. We can cut the paving, then we have a guaranteed deficit in 2020, 21, guaranteed. What do you do about that?
We find ways to generate revenue. We take
You mean
that year and
because
we.
if we cut it, then we're even more behind on paving?
No, that's the amount of money we were going to end up behind in the next year's budget.
So only 268,000 versus 700,000 this year?
Taxes would have been increased in order to compensate for some of that, yeah. Does that make sense?
Whatever we do needs to be a fix that's going to last for multiple years.
But Amy's suggestion is that we remove the paving. What everyone else, what are your thoughts?
Yours, sorry. What do you think, Bob?
My feeling is still the same. I've proposed what I thought is the best option to encompass all these. The nickel and dime approach is good, but at the same time, it's not going to prevent us from having issues the next years. I think that if we have an asset like a piano, I can't really go that route right now. I'm thinking bigger kind of solutions as opposed to the smaller solutions. You've given a lot of good time to smaller solutions, and I think that you have a lot of functions the town needs to be performing on a regular basis, and you know, if someone hits a pothole and ruins their car, I feel kind of concerned about that. So it's just that my way differs than the majority. A year ago, we probably had the votes to do what I'd like to do. I'm to the point where I'm ready just to call a vote and let everyone go home because I don't know that we're going to solve the actual issue. I think I just count the votes the way they're going to go, and I think we've exhausted the subject, and I'd prefer just to have a vote.
So,
Okay.
Amy.
I agree.
And I apologize, but this is the thing that I had up last week. I just want you to see. These this is budgeted haul 18, 19, 19, 20, and then 20, 21. So we get this money in those 2 years. This is budgeted SAFER grant. This is this year, next year, the year after that, and then zero. That's how we came up with this based on the proposed budget, that we would end up short $268,439 in 2021. We had talked about catching up on all the paving, which Loretta had asked for 338 or 339,000. But that, when I looked at this number, I'm like, oh, wait a second, we actually end up in the positive, and that's not, I mean, it'd be great, but that's not what we're trying. So that's where that number came from of the added paving. So this is that. So what we're talking about, if everything stayed just like it was right now, and this even has a higher raise in it, this is not taking out some of the money for the adjusted raises, a $300,000 house would cost $250 more. I'd rather not have to pay $200 or I'm probably closer to $208.
So this house, this $300,000.
That's right.
That would go up $250, and that same house in Walden pays a total of $303.
But we don't live in Walden.
I know we don't, but people are going to be drawn to move there because of the tax disparity. That's all I'm saying. But I agree with Bob.
I agree.
We don't have.
I'm staying here.
I also agree
Yeah, I gotta work in the
about
morning.
the, potential with the tax increase. It can make the difference in somebody deciding to live here or somewhere else. So that is a concern of mine, but I think it's time for a vote.
What would you like to vote on?
I'm going to let you propose your budget, and if you want to make amendments at a later date to it, we'll make amendments.
But it sounds like we can do that procedurally. Scares me just a little bit that we're missing something. Harry? Are we missing something?
You mean, can you amend the budget down the road?
Like next meeting, which is what we would do.
My question, how would that affect the tax rate that we have to report?
We wouldn't.
Mid-August?
May I?
Absolutely.
And then maybe you can. It makes, to me, it doesn't make any sense to pass a budget you know you're going to change, especially with a tax rate. If you're not committed to where we ended up on the first reading, it doesn't make sense to pass it on the second reading, just to turn around and before we even get there, say you're going to change it. Just, whether it doesn't bother me because we can manage it, but you use the word optics. I don't like the optics of that, saying voting for something that you know you're going to do.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time thinking, that, I feel funny about that, too.
So can everybody look at your calendars and make sure that we're cool for July meetings?
I'm having surgery July 30th.
I'll only be there at 1. Unless there's some kind of change, because 15th is my last day.
All right, so we have a meeting on the 9th, and we have a meeting on the 23rd.
The 9th, you mean the 8th?
8th, sorry. I was looking at the wrong. How will we survive? 8 and 22. Everybody else okay for those? Bill, you in town?
Yes.
For those?
I'm here.
So that would allow us on the 22nd, assuming that the first reading went fine, and that gives you plenty of notice. Is there anything weird about that window for you on the, because we'll need to have another public hearing on the 22nd.
When's your last meeting?
15th.
July? So you won't be voting on the budget? Yeah, I get your point now. You didn't?
Biggest issue with that is we now have a budget ordinance to draft, and we don't know what it's supposed to say.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure we got there.
But before we went to that step, because I don't know if it if it requires us to, prior to that, go ahead and not vote for the current budget.
No.
Doesn't matter if we do or don't, right? We can just go ahead and propose the next one. The other one just dies for lack of a vote. That's what I thought. Okay, so the proposal is, I'm in the throes of making a motion. I am heaving a motion at this moment.
Oh my God, I'm not eating them.
We want 5% cap on raises and remove the rec director from the budget.
Youth sports director.
Youth sports director, sorry. I've fired Jared almost every meeting so far, haven't I? And obviously, you guys need to recalculate the tax rate based on that. And I don't think we have to add anything about dealing with the water position because this does that. And then we'll be dealing with that when we get to it. Right?
That's fine with me.
So I move we make those changes and staff produce that budget for vote first reading at the July 8th meeting.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? So we had 3 and 2 abstentions.
No, I voted.
I voted aye.
You voted aye? So we
Mhm.
had 4. I'm sorry, I didn't
That's
hear.
all right.
Yeah. So it was unanimous, 4-0.
5-0.
Or 5 of us,
5-0.
5 of us, sorry. Maths. We can also just hang on to our second reading on the budget extension. No, we have to do
you
that.
do the
We got to do that
continuation.
one. Yeah.
We need to do the next 2.
It's way down in here. Hold on. That's the one. Okay, so this is an ordinance to temporarily continue the fiscal year 2018-2019 annual operating budget of the town of Signal Mountain, Tennessee for fiscal year 2019-2020. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second it. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 5-0. We also have an ordinance to amend ordinance numbers 2018-08 and 2019-01 entitled the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget ordinance, so as to provide for certain additional revenues and expenditures in this budget year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Got it? So,
Second.
Bill, yeah. Any discussion about this one? This one's a little more complicated to document. Read through it earlier. Anybody have any questions or concerns? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed.
I move we table the rest. The agenda for the next meeting.
So there's a motion on the table to table the rest. We can talk about the council vacancy process next time. I'll second your motion. Anybody have any discussion about that?
Nope.
All those in favor of tabling the rest of the agenda?
Aye.
Say aye. Most of the audience raised their hands, except for the one.
I was curious, in case anybody had any questions, I was one of the people that was,
Yeah, should point out, we have the 3 candidates for, who are interested in the seat are all here tonight, so thanks a bunch for showing up, and don't be frightened, they don't all take this long. Any other business that we need to bring in? We still haven't done the debt policy board?
Well, as we're still in the debt or the budget process, we that provides us a
Yeah,
little
where is it?
latitude, so we
Okay.
can wait on that now too.
I did. Motion to adjourn? I'll make it. Second, we're adjourned. Thank you for the water.
It was to keep those, or to make those positions comparable to what we anticipate the water director's pay to be.